the opening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the City Council of Universal City, Texas. It is Tuesday, September 5th, believe it or not, 2023. It's 6:31 p.m. and I'll call this meeting to order now and call for a quorum check, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby.
Here.
Councilmember Gov't.
Here.
Councilmember Bowman.
Here.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Here.
Councilmember Najarian.
Here.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Here.
Quorum is present. We shall proceed. The evening's invocation will be given by city staff this evening, and I'll lead us in the pledges. So would everyone please stand.
Let us pray. Lord, we rejoice greatly for your abundant and compassionate acts of mercy, that you saved us when there was nothing that we could do to save ourselves. We rejoice greatly that you have begotten us again and that we have eternal life through you. We rejoice greatly that we have a hope that is actively and vibrantly alive. We rejoice greatly that we have an inheritance that is incorruptible and reserved for us. Heavenly Father, we rejoice greatly that we are kept by your power and your protection, and we rejoice greatly that we are freed from the penalty and the power of sin. Lord, yours is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty. We just praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. We have an enormous agenda, as you noticed. So we've got some special things that we're going to cover, and I think part of that's why we had such good attendance this evening. And before we press on with this evening's festivities and meet and obviously the agenda, I want to recognize a very special trooper that we lost a couple of weeks ago. And her name is Carmelene Squires. She was a city council member. She was the mayor of Universal City for 6 years. Was the Woman of the Year in San Antonio in 1991. And I had the honor of speaking at her funeral on Friday at Randolph because I've known Carm for many, many years. And when I was doing lecturing and cantering at that church, she was in the back as an usher and also as a lector. So what a wonderful, wonderful lady. She's a legacy. I used to see her and her husband at HEB all the time. They would walk from Madrid. That was their daily walk back and forth to the HEB on Kitty Hawk. And just a marvelous lady. And she leaves a wonderful legacy for our community. And so she'll be respected. She's respected. She's revered. And we're proud to have had her as a significant member of our community. She served her country because her husband for 32 years was in the Air Force. And all of you that are spouses know that you serve your country just like your husband or your wife does, every one of you. So I just wanted to bring that up so all of you can celebrate the life that Carmelene had in our city. And she was a true patriot, and I loved her to death. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll move on to our first item this evening. We do have a proclamation specifically for a payroll association and Payroll Awareness Week. And is anybody here from the Payroll Association this evening? Had a chance? I didn't think you'd be able to go, but let's go ahead and read it anyway. Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby will read the proclamation, and I think you'll understand why we wanted to support this. Fair?
Proclamation, City of Universal City, Texas Payroll Week. Whereas the payroll org and its more than 20,000 members have launched a nationwide public awareness campaign that pays tribute to the nearly 150 million people who work in the United States and the payroll professionals who support the American system by paying wages, reporting worker earnings, and withholding federal employment taxes. And whereas payroll professionals in Universal City, Texas, play a key role in maintaining the economic health of Universal City, carrying out such diverse tasks as paying into the unemployment insurance system, providing information for child support enforcement, and carrying out tax withholding, reporting, and depositing. And whereas payroll departments collectively spend more than $2.4 trillion annually complying with myriad federal and state wage and tax laws, and whereas payroll professionals play an increasingly important role ensuring the economic security of American families by helping to identify non-custodial parents and making sure they comply with their child support mandates. And whereas payroll professionals have become increasingly proactive in educating both the business community and the public at large about the payroll tax withholding system. And whereas payroll professionals meet regularly with federal and state officials to discuss both improving compliance with government procedures and how compliance can be achieved at less cost to both government and businesses. And whereas the week in which Labor Day falls has been proclaimed National Payroll Week, now therefore, by virtue of the authority vested in him as mayor of Universal City, Texas, he hereby proclaims the first full week of September as Payroll Week in the city of Universal City, Texas, and offers additional support to the efforts of the people who work in Universal City, to the Alamo chapter of American Payroll Association, and to all payroll professionals. In witness whereof, Mayor John Williams does hereby set his hand and cause the seal of Universal City, Texas to be affixed this 5th day of September 2023.
Right, it's a pleasure for us to recognize them, and all of you that have been involved in the business world and receiving paychecks understand the importance and the role that the payroll system, the people in payroll are doing, because it affects our livelihood. So it's an honor for us to be able to recognize them on a yearly basis. If they come to us and ask us to be recognized, we are very proud to do that. Okay, one other quick thing about Ms. Squires. She was the very first woman to ever serve on the City Council of Universal City. Okay, we have two women tonight. We're proud of that. She was the pioneer there. She also was the first and only woman to serve as mayor of Universal City. So there's some special things that Carm accomplished in her lifetime. She was 86 years young when she passed away, and we love her, as I said before, and we remember her in our prayers and for the rest of our lives as a pioneer in Universal City. Okay, first item we have is tab number 8. It's our consent agenda. All matters listed are considered routine by council, be enacted by one motion. No separate discussion of these items. This discussion is desired, and we do have one item that the council member would like to have pulled out separately to discuss, and that is tab number E. Otherwise, items A, B, C, and D, we'll put those up for consideration for the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Councilmember Jerry makes second by Councilmember Goolsby, Member Tim Goolsby. Any other discussion? Again, we're pulling out item number E. We'll address that in a minute. So, any discussion on these items? Not called. Let's call for the vote then, please.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman.
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. Let's move on then now to the item number E, which is consider ordinance 632-PC 578, Future Land Use Plan 2023. Ordinance amending the Future Land Use Plan to change land use designation of property located at 2228 Pat Booker Road from CS Commercial Services to GC General Commercial and HDR High Density Residential, providing for severability and establishing an effective date. This is our second reading. So, brought up by you, ma'am.
No discussion, just a vote.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Okay, Councilmember Goolsby calls for the
Second.
vote. Second by Councilmember Buck. Okay, no discussion at all for anybody? All right, let's call for that vote then, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman.
No.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Okay, that motion passes. That was the motion for the vote. Okay, very good. All right, next item on our agenda is citizens to be heard. We do have 8 individuals that have signed up this evening. As you can see, it's time provided for citizens to address council on issues or concerns. Obviously, we have quite a few items on the agenda tonight, and I'm not sure exactly what items they're going to address, but they're certainly welcome to. We listen to you. We respect your feelings, and believe me, we do not just sit back and they don't let on deaf ears. We take advantage of what you say, and many times it gives us an opportunity to take some action. So the individuals that, in order that they signed up this evening, I'll call you up. And the first individual is Ms. Kim Eigelhart. Ms. Eigelhart, ma'am.
Oh, that's his fault.
Yes, ma'am.
Then I go 136 Garden Meadow Drive, always good to be back. Missed y'all. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, at the last tax rate hearing, 5 council members were discussing 3 different potential property tax rates: 49 cents, 50.5 cents, and 51 cents. Yet, we now have a proposed rate almost a penny higher than any of these numbers. How is this even possible? At last year's tax rate hearing, an air of cooperation filled these chambers as staff computed various tax rate scenarios at council's request. Fast forward 1 year. Suddenly, there is no room for cooperation. Kim Turner presented 4 possible tax rates and claimed to be unprepared to discuss any other numbers. When council asked for revenue projections on a rate of 50.5 cents, Ms. Turner shut down your deliberations, refusing to make the requested calculation. Of the 4 take-it-or-leave-it tax rates that Kim Turner presented, 2 appear to be more favorably received. One would generate a budget surplus of $164,000 and the other $40,000 more. There was no information whatsoever provided as to what rate was required to support a balanced budget. Ms. Turner's sole focus was on trying to secure the highest surplus possible, period. Her contrived lack of preparedness is unacceptable. Ms. Turner is always prepared. So Councilmember Najarian was left with no alternative but to propose a tax rate of 51.7499 cents, even though he knew none of his colleagues supported a rate above 51 cents, because staff had failed to inform him whether any lower number would support the proposed budget. I'm hereby requesting that this council take a step back and give full consideration to the proposed tax rate of 50.5 cents, as should have been done 3 weeks ago. We should not consistently have one of the highest tax rates in Dare County while simultaneously working to attract coveted businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your comments. Next individual assigned this evening is is it Elam? Yes, ma'am. Please give us your name and address for the record, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Jean Elam. I live at 8523 Athenia, Universal City. My husband and I are longtime members of Universal City. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I would like to discuss the tax rate increase in regard to the tax rate. The proposed tax rate increase shows an excess of about $400,000 plus, which would be moved to another fund. Why is there a need to raise the tax rate to a level that creates any excess of money over the proposed budget? As everyone is aware, the cost of everything is increasing and it's more difficult to make ends meet, especially for senior citizens. I would appreciate the considerations to lower the tax rate enough to cover the current budget. However, if you decide to raise the tax rate, do it only enough to cover the current budget rather than create excess funds. The second concern I have is the need to have a permit to repair a fence. When property is purchased, a survey usually takes place to make sure that everything, such as the house, the driveways, the fences, etc., are located within the boundaries of the property. Property lines are marked for accuracy, making sure that any fence is in the right place. Therefore, when the fence is in need of repair, I do not see any reason why anyone would have to get a permit to repair their fence. Maintenance is a part of being a homeowner. No one should have to get approval or authorization to maintain what they own. Especially senior citizens may have to budget for the repair using their limited income. However, having to budget for the fee to to get approval to repair their own fence does not seem necessary and may limit them to affordability to do the repairs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I am hopeful you will consider my concerns.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your concern. Thank you for your comments. Next evening, is Mr. Rick Mensch. Is it Mensch? Sir?
I'm impressed, you pronounced it correctly.
I think I've seen you before.
Rick Mensch, 110 Lowell Lane. I'm here to speak about the tax rate as well. I'm recently retired on fixed income, and we've all seen record inflation over the last couple of years. 2021, 2022, double-digit inflation. Our property taxes have skyrocketed. The valuations have gone up, so therefore we're paying more property taxes. The two previous guests stole a lot of my thunder, but I would just say that I'm all okay, I guess, with the 0.505, I think it is, a compromise rate. I guess I'm okay with that, but it's totally unacceptable for anything higher than that. That still, from what I understand, meets the city's budget needs and gives a little cushion. So I'm going to remember how you all voted. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mensch. Okay, next individual, Ms. Denise Thomas. Ms. Thomas?
Good evening. My name is Denise Thomas, and thank you, Mayor and City Council, for listening to me again today. I'm here concerning Capano Ridge and the vacant lot in front of Capano Ridge on Kitty Hawk Road. I've been here several times and presented, our issues to everyone, and I'm considerate and thankful that everyone has listened to us. But I'd like to go even further and let you know some of the damage that the overgrown grass is doing to members who live along that fence. The rodents, it's terrible. We've had poison ivy, we've had other things that have happened. My neighbor just had to have a pest control come in and get a possum out of her attic. That's, it's destroying our property. They're eating up the fence lines. And, it's just, we have to do something about it. So, I want to stress even more, besides it being unsightly and it looks bad, it's a hazard. And, over on Road 30, over in that area, they had a fire from, just from weeds and stuff like that. So we certainly don't want something like that to happen in our community, because, and then too, kids have to walk along that area, because it's school right there. If they want to cut through, they can't. And we don't know what's living, and the trees are getting higher, it's getting worse. So I'd like you to consider all of that, and, if there's something that you can do, please do it. If we need to look at some state law or something other, we're prepared to help you help us. So whatever you can do, and thank you for listening to me.
Ma'am, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Concern. Okay, next individual, Mr. Paul, is it Reichert?
Close enough.
Close enough? Sir? You can stand right there, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate being here today. I'm Paul Rehart. I live at 153 Clear Oak in Universal City. Like several others, it's on the increased tax. I too realize that everything's gone up, in the last few years. It's what people voted for. It's just that if maybe we don't do the top, maybe we don't do the highest amount. If we can go a little lower, it'll help guys like me and like several other here to be able to afford a little better. So I thank you much for
All right,
listening.
thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Okay. Next individual, Mr. Bernard Rubel. Mr. Rubel.
Mr. Mayor, council members, Bernie Rubel, 635 Balboa Drive. I've had the opportunity within the last month to ride the city streets with a very knowledgeable person about the affairs of Universal City. I've also had within this past month the ability to talk to 3 of the council members with regard to what our status is on things like roads and infrastructure and so forth. To my shock, even those council members who are new and want to move things forward for infrastructure, I found resignation. We accept what will be without a change. Let's look at what will be. In September, 93 streets were proposed for repair. Of course, our city knew that only a small portion of that could be repaired with a $30 million bond. Here are the streets to be repaired. That's approximately 25% of what was proposed to get the voters to vote. So far, so good, 25%. Now, let's see how long it'll take to catch up to this list, just to catch up to this list. 4 generations, 80 years to catch up to the list that's been proposed. What do you think the streets are going to look like in 80 years? Okay. So basically, I don't accept council's position where nothing can be done with our infrastructure. We have poured money into the city from from everything from sales tax to our homes. I think we have to control cost, and I am appreciative of the council in your consideration for that. Remember, you are committing to 4 generations without significant improvement in infrastructure, not even to meet what you plan to do. Is that time 2 or time over? Am I over?
No, you're not over.
30 seconds, sir.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, very good. This past month, in a walk through the district, I found a fairly large leak that most of you have gotten videos, and also there's been some online posting in the same leak. Talked to Randy, and he said that there's some difficulty in finding where the leak was. I can appreciate that, but one of the things he said that caught my attention, he said essentially, we don't have the documentation for the storm sewer line for the area in question. And we'll even say that part of that was in the city park, at least a significant portion of it. We don't have the documentation. In January, there was supposed to be in front of this council a presentation of the status of our document management system. Document management systems are extraordinarily important to keep the history of our city, to be able to identify the history of our city, and also to provide essentially the documentation that we need to move the city forward. Recently, our city manager proposed that we have an interfund loan debt between the golf course and the city of 1.9, and then a month later she said $2.2 million. So in an open records request, I asked for a list of what was on that $2.2 million that dates back to 2005, where our city took over the management of the golf course. That list could not be produced because our financial records are in paper boxes, and only the minimum amount of financial records are there. So I pressed that further, and I found that we were out of date. Oh, I'm sorry, now I'm over time.
Getting pretty close. We can see that.
And I'll
Appreciate your comments, but go ahead. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so basically I found that our record management system was out of date. Talked to the city manager, and I found that essentially there is movement to improve the records management system, but without being able to identify our financial history or even our infrastructure history, I hope that this council will good, clean record management systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rugal.
Okay, very good. Next individual signed up, and if I pronounce it wrong, I'm going to apologize. Is it Jason Delgado? Jason, got it? Okay. And we have a visitor from Cibolo.
Yes.
Mr. Delgado, welcome.
Long time ago, I grew up in Shirts and Cibolo.
Very good.
This is something new for me. I'm a member of the Tri-County City Council, Mayor, City staff. I'm a member of the Tri-County Chamber of Commerce. I'm just going to let you know and your citizens know that on September 12th, we're going to have our luncheon at the Live Oak Garden Inn. We have it every month, and we're starting to move around to different cities. You're a city partner of ours as well. And we're trying to find a place here in Eagle City where we can host our lunches. So I want y'all to keep in mind that we're coming to your city that day. So I want to also let city know and city staff and city citizens that October 19th, we're going to have a glow-in-the-dark golf tournament at Olympia Hills. What that consists of is we're going to play 9 holes at 4 p.m., come back in, have awards and dinner for the first 9 holes, and we're going to go out and play another 9 holes after dusk at 7:30 or so. So it'll still be a little bit live, but you don't want to leave many golf balls at Olympia, so that's kind of tough. And then on September 28th, we're going to have our mixer out in Garden Ridge, another city part of ours. It's going to be at the Raptors. We're going to have a little block party. It's going to be between Raptors 2 and a little shop there called JJ's Green Grace. So we're going to have a little mixer there. It starts about 5:30, so just want to invite you, the city and staff, and some citizens to come out and see us. So thank you for hearing me. Y'all have a great rest of your evening. I know you have a lot to do, and I won't keep you, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. Appreciate it very much. Okay, so you know what's going on in the Tri-County Chamber, right? All right, so the last individual that signed up on the document here is Mr. Thomas Herndon. Mr. Herndon?
Thank you. It's Thomas Herndon, 311 Woodford Drive. And I would just like to speak on the tax rate as well. I think, again, just like other people have mentioned, in this time of financial struggle for most individuals, I think it would just be very irresponsible for the council to vote on raising the tax limit even above the proposed budget. I mean, it makes sense too that we need to have a balanced budget and we need to bring in as much as we need to cover the budget that's been decided. But to raise it to then have a surplus on top of that, when most families are just struggling to make ends meet and just be able to try and make it by. As I said, property taxes have gone up higher and higher. Just basic goods have gone up at incredible rates over the last few years. And I don't think Universal City citizens are looking for you as a city council to then do the same thing to them. An unnecessary situation where it's not even being used for something specific. If there's a need for $400,000 extra above the budget, I think that would be a great thing that you would take to the citizens and say, would you guys like us to raise taxes to do this? But to raise it just for the sake of having some extra in an account makes no financial sense to me. I don't think your average citizens would be really appreciative of exactly that. So I would just encourage you to make sure that we try to keep the budget as close to balance as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very good. All right. I also give everybody the opportunity that would like to address council that didn't get a chance to sign up. So if anyone would like to address council on that, I would be more than happy to have you. Yes, ma'am.
So we can sign up even though we're a little late?
Yes, I'm allowing you to sign. It's no problem. No problem at all.
You just talk.
Evening. My name is Annie Gunn. I live at 166 Clear Oak, and we really enjoy Universal City, and we appreciate being part of a great neighborhood, but we just don't want our taxes to go up. It's been too much, and we appreciate Ashton keeping us in notified, but please consider us, those of us that live on fixed incomes, that, it's just too much. But thank you for hearing me.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? We have a couple, yes ma'am.
Renata Banda. I live on 162 Clear Oak in Universal City. And I just want to let you know I've been a widow for 22 years and I have very little income, and I would appreciate it if things would just slow down, okay? Because I have a house where I have to fix up, and I don't know where the money comes from. So that's all I have to say. So I'm sorry, I'm not a good speaker, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Jared Erickson. I live at 329 Colonial Bluff in Capano Ridge. I would just like to address the vacant lot that we have out in front of that neighborhood. When I moved there 5 years ago, it was cut pristine, I guess, to get everyone to move in. Now that we all have moved in, it is overgrown. Posing a big fire hazard, being that we are kind of in a valley. The winds really pick up, so if a little fire were to break out, that thing's just going to go up in flames really quick. I don't want our community to be on the TV because, you know, we're going to lose some homes. All of that brush is extremely dry, and it is really overgrown now. I know that we have rodent problems, but the main concern, as these summers keep getting hotter and hotter, is that a fire will break out. And like I said, those winds pick up very heavily down there. So if, you know, something can be done about that, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
Yes, sir. Please.
My name is Gary Gunn. I live at 166 Clear Oak. And I just want to voice my objection to the amount of increase in taxes that we are about to consider as a community, as a family. Where are we going to get that extra money if those of us who are retired don't get it anymore? We're not working, we're not getting we're not going to see an increase. What we've seen is a reduction in our own spending. We do without. And I think as a community, I think we ought to tighten our belt a little bit. And let's live within our means. Council members, it's under your control. But I'll tell you right now, I'm against any increase, but some increase may be necessary. Please consider those of us who have already suffered through an incredibly difficult couple of years of increased costs in everything. And I ask you to really weigh heavily your decision, because it means a lot to a lot of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Yes, sir.
My name is Charles Ford. I stay at 313 Resident Springs in Capano Ridge also. I stay in the cul-de-sac, so I'm right next to that field that's a nuisance. I filled out 3 online surveys to the code compliance. I haven't got any issue of response, so not sure why we have code compliance for that, but that field is a hazard. The trees are growing, it's leaning on my fence right now, and it's kind of leaning, making like a fall. So if we can do something about that, we definitely have a rodent problem too as well. Thank you.
Sir. Appreciate it very much. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Patricia Donahue. I live at 326 Balboa Drive. I am here to speak on the issue of the tax rate. I made my points last meeting about my personal concerns. I'd like to bring up the idea of businesses. As was brought up by Councilmember Bowman at our last meeting and Councilmember Vaughn, we have businesses here in town that will have significant increases in their taxes that they have to pay. We have stated as a community and as your members, as the council, that we want to attract businesses to Universal City. We want to improve our business likelihood in our area. How many times have we heard it's gone to Cibolo, it's gone to Shirts, it's gone to Live Oak. It's not come to Universal City. Yes, we have a few things on the planning. But I'm afraid if taxes increase to the rate at what was discussed at the last meeting, some of those who don't have hard, firm commitments to come to the city, or some of those who are here in the city that received money to come here and to build here, they find it too expensive to stay here with the amount of inflation that is going up in every area of our society. So I would like to again ask you to reconsider the rate that was voted on the last meeting, to consider a lower rate, not simply for the citizens, although I am one of those, and I would truly appreciate not having my taxes go up because mine are not set. But I'm more concerned about the businesses and the turnover of businesses. I lived in Universal City since 1992, and I've seen the turnover in Universal City of businesses. I don't want to see that happen to our community anymore. Thank you very much.
Thanks, ma'am. Let me also remind you that we will be having public hearings on the budget and the tax rate, and that gives you an opportunity also to speak after the presentations are made before council deliberates on that. I want to remind you that that's available. So anyone else would like to address the set right now before we press on? Okay, again, thank you everyone for your input. We really appreciate it. It doesn't go on deaf ears, I promise you. Okay, so let's move on then now to our business items for this evening. Our first one is tab number B. It's to consider ordinance 581 line PUD 2023-105 with the addition of architectural and ordinance of the City Council of Universal City, Texas. It's amending the zoning map of UC, Texas for approximately 12-acre property located at 2280 Pat Booker Road, rezoning said property from C3 commercial to PUD 2023-104 district, generally for multifamily residential and convenience storage, adopting the PUD panel plan related to PUD 2023-104 district, providing for severability for the publication of the caption of the ordinance and establishing an effective date. This is our second meeting on this issue. So, Mr. Casado.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you recall from the last meeting, the ordinance, rezoning, and FLUP were approved in the first reading. However, there was a condition of the approval for the self-storage component. The council wanted to see some additional renderings and some more detail on the architecture for that portion of the overall development. The applicant did provide us with some updated drawings and some more detail, and they're here to make a presentation to show you what they came up with.
And for your edification, everyone in the audience, these call for 2 readings. Many of these items call for 2 readings. And as we met with them a couple of weeks ago, we expressed some concern about some issues, and that's why they're addressing for the second reading this evening.
Right. As a reminder, Mayor, thank you. The first reading was done conditionally, and so what they're hoping this evening is that condition is removed.
That's correct.
So they can move on with their project and their findings.
Absolutely. Okay, gentlemen.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Good to see you all again. I'm Thomas Hills and David Strauss with the CRX Ventures, and upon request of the council, we've returned to go over example photos and elevations of some self-storage projects that our architect has designed previously to give an idea of what our project will look like at 23 Pappas Hill. So here are a couple of photos of our architect's previous projects, which we understand also designed the most recently approved project in the city. These do look differently than how ours will look, but we wanted to showcase the abundant skill and creativity of our architect. Here's a comparable project to ours in terms of layout, where this building starts as a 2-story building, and then as the land slopes downward, as you can see here, then becomes a 3-story building, which is how we expect ours to be laid out. And the materials for this project will not closely resemble our project. We expect to have something more like this project, where we'll have stone lining the office with perhaps arches that will be an homage to Randolph. And additionally, the stucco will be more of a white color rather than a brown, again, to complement the Air Force Base as well as the apartment project. And here's the site plan we are working with. Again, one building that is 3 stories at its highest. And to show the setbacks to residences, there's about 250 feet in between the closest single-family residence and the edge of the self-storage building, which is equivalent to the distance from City Hall to the closest Peppermill apartment building. And then the distance from self-storage building to the closest Peppermill unit is about 45 to 65 feet, depending on where you measure. And as you can see here, we already have a strong buffer of trees, although we are going to supplement those with additional trees, which will mitigate the visual impact to any single-family or multi-family residents in the area. And here's the timeline, which we are working with for the self-storage project. We hope to close online by the end of this year. Begin construction early next year, and then construction period will take about 10 to 12 months. And so we'll begin leasing up end of next year, which may lead into beginning of 2025. And we hope these drawings and elevations give you an idea of what it will look like and aid in the approval process. But please let us know if you have any more questions.
Did you want anything else?
Yeah, the only thing is, we went out and walked the neighbors. They have large trees in their backyard, and I'm talking about not only Peppermill, but also, well, a single family is so far away. They do have big trees also. Those 2 areas are going to have 8-foot fences. Well, if you put an 8-foot fence up and there's existing trees, you know, I'm not going to say in the middle of winter they won't see this building, but it will not be impactful. And then we're adding extra trees to buffer.
Okay. Okay. So while you're still here, let me open it up for council for comments or discussion if they want to have, and then I'll entertain a motion after that. But let's open it up for discussion. Anybody have something you want to offer? Add to it? I think you met what we asked for. I think you met what we asked for, definitely. So if there's no specific other discussion, let's go ahead and call for the vote then, please.
We need a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to have a motion.
I move to approve.
Can't have a vote without the motion, right? No discussion, but we do have a motion.
Move to approve.
Councilman Najarian makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Buck. Thanks for getting me up to speed, guys. Okay. All right. Being no more discussion, let's go for the vote, please.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Gorski.
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman.
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Aye.
Good. Thank you very much. You gentlemen proceed. I think you listened, and this is certainly acceptable to us. All right. So the next items we have a couple of notes. We have a no tab, then we have action, no tab action, no tab action. And it's related to a specific project. And so the way that the procedure is one's related to a future land use plan, one's related to zoning, and one's related to a planned unit development. And because that's the way it needs to be, and the way we will vote on it. So we'll open it up right now for City Council to hear from City staff. Then I'll open up the public hearing on the future land use plan, and then we'll discuss it because they have to be voted on separately. So Ms. Turner, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Michael, you're going to do the presentation first.
This is related to, by the way, public hearing is going to open up on for Calvary Chapel. And it's a request for an amendment to the future land use plan from our retail to non-NS neighborhood services. Approximately 5-acre tract located at 1922 Bat Booker Road, 2103, University City Boulevard, which you can see in the back of the room here. So it's for zoning ordinance 581. So let's go ahead and open for you staff to discuss it. Then council will discuss it.
Well, thank you, Mayor. You pretty much covered the highlights of what they're proposing. So the applicant is, again, looking to relocate their entire operation from the Triangle Shopping Center to the shopping center Olympia, that Olympia formerly occupied across the street. And with that, just some specific highlights. They're looking to include at the new location the church and sanctuary, the Bible college, K-12 academy, medical clinic, commercial kitchen and cafe, and a dining area, a multi-purpose gym, and administrative offices. We sent out 17 legal notices as required by state law. We received one response, which was a no objection. Planning and Zoning Commission did consider this and recommended approval on a vote of 9-0. As always with PUDs, the approval standards that the applicant is required to respond to are included in the packet. The applicant is here and they would like to make a presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over to them.
Okay. Who is making the presentation? Yes, sir. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Thank you for having us. Thank you for hearing me again. Some of this will sound familiar because not a lot has changed, except we've moved pretty far forward with the landlord, and we're hoping that, I'll have to say, we're pretty excited to be where we are today. So we're really hopeful for a solid vote tonight. But again, as Michael had shared, we are looking to move into the Olympia space. Sorry. We'll just jump right to it. So a lot of y'all are familiar. Pretty interesting because the presentation just before is the space right next to where we are. But this space is right across the street here, the Olympia space. And we are, the current use of that space is C2 retail. And our proposed uses, as Michael shared, do not allow us to do all of our proposed uses under retail. And in fact, there's not a single zoning code that allows us to have all of those under one. So APUD is the best option that we have available for us. So as he said, a religious assembly with the sanctuary, a larger sanctuary, 800 to 1,000 seats, a smaller chapel, 200 to 300 seats, children's church classrooms, multi-purpose room and gym, kind of an event center, K through 12 academy, medical clinic, a kitchen, cafe, Bible college, radio program, and administrative offices. And everything we do is free. We don't charge anybody for anything that we have here. Again, hearing some of the presentations earlier, I feel like this is a welcome thing to keep in the community, are free options for everybody. And we are a nonprofit as well. We're not looking to purchase the space, so there's not a tax revenue impact in terms of the property tax with the lease agreement that we have set up. In terms of modifications to the facility, mostly everything's going to be interior with some minor exterior changes dealing with entry and signage. Okay, thank you. Good, because I actually forget to click it when I'm doing it. I usually get behind. Okay, so again, we're looking to relocate from the Triangle Shopping Center, and we would like to move all of our ministries under one roof. We're disparate right now. We have multiple places that we're leasing, and we're outgrowing the space that we're in. So we're looking to leave the more prominent Triangle Shopping Center to move out here to this location, which is perfectly set within commercial services, neighborhoods, and so forth. Even our youth have to meet over at Mr. Gaddy's on Sunday mornings. Mr. Gaddy is kind enough to let us do our youth services over there. We would love to keep them in our facility without them running across the parking lot to go have services. And again, we just do not have enough physical space to effectively serve the growing community and fellowship that we have. We desire to continue to be a part of the Universal City community as we have been for 28 years now. Leasing more space in the current location is not allowed. Suitable vacant facilities within the permitted zoning districts just don't exist, and buying and developing land is not an option for us. So again, we're looking to move into the less prominent Olympia space right across the street here. It meets our need to consolidate. I'll go back one slide. It meets our need to consolidate into more suitable, larger space with Universal City. It frees up prime retail spaces in the more visible, highly sought after Triangle Shopping Center. It immediately utilizes a large retail facility that's 51,000 square feet that will quite possibly sit vacant for quite a while. I'm not going to get into too much about current landlord or anything like that, but I think that we would be a very welcome tenant in that space. I'll let that lay there. More appropriately, it brings our services closer to residents and neighborhoods, and it fulfills our desire to continue to be a big part of Universal City. The Olympia space is vacant. It's available for a new tenant starting in October. The property owner fully supports our uses, our modifications, and our application. And as I said before, it's currently retail, and PUD is the only option that we have moving forward. That's it there. That's one great picture of it, as you've seen it a couple times already. And then the next slide. There's another view of it. There you go. So that's another view, aerial view. We'll make it clear that we're looking at doing the PUD rezone of that space, not the entire shopping center itself. In terms of modifications to the exterior, we're looking at adding signage to the front. We've got our medical clinic that we would put a sign up for, the academy, the church itself, as well as a church sign on the marquee where Olympia currently is. And then on the back, the next slide, we would put up a sign on the back that is also for our church. We will utilize the parking lot. So we intend on the back entrance also being a secondary entrance for church services as well. So we're going to need to put our sign back there as well. And the next slide. In terms of entry modification, as great as I am as an architect, which I'm not, PowerPoint let me do this. We're looking at expanding the entryway in some way to the front that makes it a more prominent entrance, something more suitable for the number of people that will be coming and going outside of the facility. Of course, we will make sure that it's, architecturally sound and approved by the city. And then the next slide. This is what we intend to do with the interior. Again, as I stated before, it's still our chicken scratch on the back of a napkin that will become something once we get your vote tonight. The big box on the right will house the religious assembly, the eating establishment, and then the multipurpose gym, event room, as well as all of our children's church classrooms. On the left side of the facility would house our medical clinic, our K-12 academy, the administrative offices, the Bible college, and our radio program. Everyone's favorite topic when I came the last time, where are you going to put this bus? So we're going to hide it in the back. I think that should be acceptable for everyone. And that is our actual bus, as pretty as it is. So we intend to park it in the back right up against there. There's a little walk-up on the back. It doesn't take up any existing parking, and it fits perfectly there. So that's what we're intending on doing there. The next slide. In terms of parking, I got to do spreadsheets and math. So all of our uses we considered in using the data that's required, the parking requirements from the code. And we looked at a weekday requirement as well as an evening and weekend requirement, because we're not going to use the space for all of the services all at one time. So in terms of what would be required for parking spaces on weekdays would be 312 parking spaces. And then in terms of parking spaces required for evenings and weekends would be a higher number of 433. And the next slide. So taking that into consideration, the total existing parking is just under 1,000 spaces in that. And then just around the blue there, around our specific area itself, is 560 spaces. More than enough to satisfy either one of those requirements that we would have. Next slide. Another topic that came up again was the school drop-off and pickup. So this is our lines that would show how we would do school pickup and drop-off, which would occur. Drop-off would be 7:45 a.m. to 8 a.m. Monday through Friday, and then pickup is 3:45 to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Really, the maximum of any number of cars that we would have at any one time would be about 15 to 20 cars. I chuckled developing the chart. There is way more than enough space than we could ever imagine in terms of pickup and drop-off for a car. So there will never be a line out on the main thoroughfares, and there will never be a line in front of any of our partners in the facility. The next slide. I chuckle at this too because it's a schedule that already has arrows on my chart that are not on there. But our plan is to have everything closed up tonight and then to move forward with our design documents and permitting for us to hopefully, it's getting more and more challenging to get there, would be potentially to have our first service, Easter service next year. And then the other uses to move in by the end of the summer and then the end of the year. Okay, and then these questions I brought up with y'all before, nothing's changed there, but if we were, we are not requiring a school zone, so if it's not required by a code or anything like that, we're not asking for a school zone on any of the main thoroughfares. And then in terms of alcohol and gun sales, we would sign it right now. We would waive we would support waiving any limitation that would be levied on the local businesses by us being in there either as a church or as a school. Okay, the next slide. I have a couple final thoughts. The first one here deals with kind of the financial impact of our church on the community and moving into this particular space. We have to move. We have no choice. We want to stay in Universal City. In terms of revenue opportunity, Calvary Chapel draws locals into the community that otherwise would not conduct business in Universal City. 90+% of our congregation does not live in Universal City. I'm one, I live in Cibolo, and I spend the majority of my time in Universal City. We have a bunch of people here. In fact, I don't know if maybe a couple of them actually live in Universal City. The rest of them come in from Live Oak. Actually, he's probably the only one. Live Oak, we have folks that come in from, as far out as Bernie. We have visitors that come frequently from other states. People that come that are brought in by the base, they come to visit our church as well. We have people that live in St. Hedwig, and they all come to the community. We also have people that have started purchasing houses in Universal City to be closer to the church. And ironically, one of them purchased a house right here across from where we're looking without knowing we were looking over here. We have 7 services each week. So we have one each at 7:00 p.m. on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And then we have 4 services that occur on Sundays, 3 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. Currently, we bring in about 300 is our max that we can bring into our current facility. So that's 300 per service. Moving into this new location, we will triple that pretty much day one. So we'll be bringing in thousands of people into this city multiple times a week that otherwise would not do business here. So people eat, shop, and hang out where they attend church. That's greater local retail exposure, increased sales tax revenue. And like I said, some people may even decide to live here. And the next slide. This one's more of the less financial impact, but still an impact on the community. Us moving and being a part of this community, everything we do with all of our free ministries directly supports the city, their ordinance proposed purpose and intent to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare of the present and future citizens of the city of Universal City. Everything we do is 100% free. Our school contributes to community learning success. Our medical care improves overall community health. Our counseling nurtures community vitality, decreasing government costs to support that. We promote personal accountability, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. We help to improve marriages, decreasing domestic violence. We stimulate civic duty, community projects, volunteering, and outreach. And then we help to reduce crime, drug use, which equals a safer community. It equals economic growth, and it attracts new residents and businesses. And that is all that I have. I thank you for your time. Please vote in support of what we're asking to do. I think that it is a win-win-win for everyone involved, in terms of for us, in terms of for our landlord, and in terms of for the city and the local tenants that we have. Right now, that shopping center is dead, and it continues to kind of bleed and die. Once we move in there, that parking lot's going to be full. Businesses are going to want to move in there. You talk about businesses that go to other cities that decide there's going to be great opportunity, especially for places like a Subway or any kind of a boutique food place that would love to move in and easily benefit from us bringing thousands of people in multiple times a week into that facility. I think we would only do good for Universal City. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. The procedure now is I'll open up a public hearing. So if anybody in the audience would like to address this issue, this first one is related to a future land use plan change. Then there'll be a zoning one. Then there'll be a planned use development one. But that's the way the process is. So it's exactly 7:31. So I'll open up the public hearing. At that time, does anybody want to address this issue? All right. Yes, sir.
Do I need to say my address again?
You're okay.
Probably sorry. I think it's actually a great idea. I think that shopping center, as you said, has seemed to be going down, less and less stuff going on in that area. And I think throughout Universal City, we're seeing lots of open space. So that modular facility also sitting open for who knows how long. We like to bring someone in who's going to bring a lot to the table to the community and to actual tenants as well. So,
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, 7:32, I'll close the public hearing, and then we'll go to tab number C, which is to discuss and to consider the ordinance, the 632 PC with the future land use plan, to change the land use designation at 1922 Patrick Road, 2103 Universal City Boulevard, from R retail to NS Neighborhood Services, providing for severability and establishing an effective date. This will be our first reading on that one, so open it up to council.
Move for approval.
Motion made by Councilmember
Second.
Vaughn, second by Councilmember Bowman. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the point of the waiving of gun and alcohol restrictions, we talked about it when they first came to give us the presentation. Have we looked into that? Is there any concern with specifically the Murphy gas station or the pawn shop being affected because of alcohol or gun sales?
We did look into that issue, both of those issues, and neither of them is a concern.
Okay. To the pastor, thank you, sir, for coming out tonight. I drove around it over the weekend, and you are absolutely right. There is plenty of space for the pickup and drop-off activities in the morning. I appreciate you drawing out the diagram for us. Helps understand kind of what the plan is. A couple of years ago, my lovely wife and I had a elementary school kid at the house, and we had to go do pickup and drop off, and it was a nightmare. So your plan looks very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Mr. Jarrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Pastor, I had one question for you as far as your Malta facility. You're going to have some major increased space with this, as far as
The current plan is to at least copy what we have, and if there's space that allows for us to have a larger facility, then we would. But I will say that our higher priority really is having a large enough sanctuary, one, and two, if we could increase the number of students in the school, we would love to do that. We have a waiting list that is equally as large as the number of students that are enrolled in the school.
Thank you. And I was just going to say, either way you look at it, whether, I mean, as far as fitting into your plan, your chapel has been exemplary part of Universal City for a long time. I see your need to move. My one question, my one and only question and objection, you clearly got rid of, which is you don't have any plans on buying in this facility, which would be my only problem there. So I think this is the perfect spot for you, perfect place in the neighborhood, and I welcome you here with open arms. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Patrick.
As a follow-up and kind of to build on Paul's, I know last time we asked if you were planning on buying it, and you said at this point it wasn't for sale. If that changed by the owner, would you be interested in buying it? Because then that would impact taxes.
Being interested and being able is like the Grand Canyon in our world. So the fact that it is for sale, he has told us from day one it's for sale. What he has told us is that it's not for lease to own, which would be, at this point, the only way we would ever be able to own it would be to do a lease to own agreement, which is not what we're signing on to. We are signing on to, and it makes us all nervous, a 30-year lease with some caveats that are tied to it, but there's no purchase option that's involved with it. And even if he came to us begging for us to buy it, we are not anywhere close to being in a position to purchase it.
And the commercial kitchen, I know it says it's for nonprofit and non-food sales. Can you articulate a little bit about what your plan is for that space? Is it just to serve your own congregation?
We picture a restaurant that we would put in there, and it would mostly be like a brunch kind of place, and it won't be open every day because the people that would serve there would also be the ones that serve during all of our church services and school activities. But we do plan on actually serving a real menu, real food, and it would be available to anybody and everybody. It's not just for our congregation.
So not necessarily, not food sales, you're saying more of a
free, it's
kitchen, soup kitchen kind of a place?
It's not a soup kitchen, no.
I don't know what, I'm trying to come up with the
I know,
word.
exactly. Most of what we do makes people give that look that you're giving.
Well, no, it's not, I just am trying to understand what your intention is with it.
I'm saying that to kind of bring levity to it, but
Yeah.
the reality is that a lot of, like, especially with the restaurant, a lot of people don't understand that what we really mean is it's a restaurant, that we will serve food. We're just not going to charge people during the time that we're open. For us, it would be an outreach opportunity. It would allow people in our congregation to invite people to come to church and then maybe have them come back later in the week and let's have a meal and let's talk to each other. And I know that one of the questions will come up is, well, how does that fit with Subway if they came in? How does that fit with King's? All of that. I assure you, and I know that I'm just giving you words, they will benefit immensely with us being there. And if I can give an example, I will give you an example of the owner of Shanghai that's at the Triangle Shopping Center where we are now. When we told him what we were planning to do, he broke down in tears. And even if we had a restaurant there, he would have told us, open your restaurant next door. I need you guys to be here. So it's anecdotal at best.
Sure.
But.
And you said you don't plan on opening every day, but kind of what are your thoughts? Big picture?
What are the hours that you were picturing?
8 to 2, and closed on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays.
8 to 2, closed on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays.
Okay. And I know we talked about this last time, but just from a standpoint of the Triangle Shopping Center, just to get it on while we're talking about it here in the meeting officially as opposed to concept, we have kind of a plan on how that won't go into another church.
Oh, I understand what you're talking about. So one of the things that Mr. Patrick and my point of view asked me about that is the tax situation and how that operates and what happened with another church wanted to go into this one expanded. So I did check with the chief appraiser as well as our tax attorney that even if the church did purchase the facility, only the portion that they were using would be considered nonprofit. They would still be zone C2 retail on the portion that they're not operating. If they or another church wanted to go into that facility based on the way our ordinance is written, they would have to come back. If it was a different church, get their own planned use development agreement and permit that they're doing this evening. If they wanted to expand into more of the church, they would have to come back to city council to revise their planned use development. It is only for that specific space that we're talking about this evening. So any church use beyond that would have to come back before the planning and zoning.
Thank you.
I think it's pretty obvious that your landlord realizes that you probably are the perfect choice for that property. And so, is there any other discussion by anyone else? We do have the motion. We do have a second. So let's call for the vote then.
Who was the?
There's Mr. Vaughn and Ms. Coleman.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman?
Aye.
Mayor Christian Goolsby?
Aye.
Councilmember Buck?
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. That's the first part. That's the future land use plan. Okay. Now we'll go into officially a public hearing to discuss a change, the zoning change from C2 retail to planned unit development. Okay, for that same acreage, and it's for zoning ordinance 581. So this is now the same discussion. We won't have a presentation again, but this changes the zoning on that particular piece of property. So I'll open up the public hearing at, I guess it's 7:41. And does anyone want to discuss any other items related to this particular issue? All right, I'll close it right away. We'll go on now to open it up for council. And that will be, actually the second, we're gonna have a, excuse me, from tab 2, we go right to tab 3. We can go right to tab 3, right? Okay, which is a request for approval of the planned use development. And that's another related item to this particular whole process. Excuse me. And it's a 5-acre tract, and it's for zoning units 581 for Calvary Chapel. So there's no change on that at all. So the public hearing, I'll open that at 7:42. Any discussion, anyone? All right, I'll close it right away, and we'll move on then to tab number D, which gets council back in the activity here. Discuss and consider the ordinance to excuse me, amend the zoning map for those acreages to change it, zoning said property from C2 retail to public unit, development PUD 2023, generally for religious assembly. And this will be our first reading because it will provide for severability, providing for the publication of the caption of this ordinance and establishing an effective date. This is our first reading. So, council, I'll open it up for you and I'll be glad to entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Najarian, second by Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Goolsbee. Discussion, anyone? Yes, Ms.
Do we
Fitzpatrick?
need to read the motions as they're written out, provided to us?
Pretty sure we have those.
Sorry.
It helps only because obviously we want future councils to know what you voted on. They obviously go back to the package that we provided them in the case that you would humor us and read the entire thing.
Well, then let me make the motion, Mr. Mayor, that PC 586 ZC 248, after conducting a public hearing on the request for a zone change for a portion of the property at 1922 Pat Booker Road, 2103 Universal City Boulevard, and receiving the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendations, City Council has considered the request and moves to approve PC 586 ZC 248 and the zone change from C2 retail to PUD 2023-106 district for a portion of the property at 1922 Pat Booker Road, 2103 Universal City Boulevard, where Calvary Chapel of San Antonio will be located, with the following conditions. 1, City Council approval of the FLUP amendment, FLUP amendment from R Retail to NS Neighborhood Services. And number 2, City Council approval of the PUD final plan.
Okay, does that meet with your approval, Mr.
Yes, it does, sir.
Pro Tem? Okay, all right. Good, that makes it totally official. Any other discussion? All right, call for the vote then, please.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsbee?
Aye.
Councilmember Bud?
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman?
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We'll move on. Tab number E is a presentation of the FY 2023 third quarter financial report.
Okay, we still need to have the pause.
Yeah, PUD.
There's
Oh,
another.
I'm sorry.
There's a third motion.
Okay, this was the future land use plan and the zoning, and now you want, now the PUD has to be included. I thought he mentioned that in his motion.
Actually, we were on tab D. I believe that Mr. Najarian read the one for the zone change in his motion rather than for the PUD in the final plan.
Okay.
The ordinance includes both the zone change and the PUD.
Right,
So
okay.
to pass the ordinance, it would have been the third motion.
Okay, the third motion would be for the PUD then, or for the, okay. Okay, we do have one more motion. I don't think you need to repeat it. We've already said what it's gonna be. So we want to make a motion there to approve the planned use development of the property.
Move to approve.
Okay, Mr. Najarian made that motion.
Second.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem Goolsbee. Discussion further? All right, it's totally official now. Call for the vote.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsbee?
Aye.
Councilmember Bud?
Yes. Aye.
Councilmember Bowman?
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Aye.
The motion passes. It's a unique procedure that we have to follow because there are different elements related to it. So congratulations, you guys. Welcome. We're glad you're going to stay in the family. We're glad you're going to stay in the family, and it's a perfect location for you. We look forward to starting as quickly as we possibly can. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go ahead and cover now tab number E, and then we'll take a short break before we get on to the public hearing related to the budget and the tax plan. So it's presentation on third quarter financial reports. Then we'll take a break.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In front of you should have the third quarter financial reports for fiscal year 23. As of June 30th, 2023, we completed 75% of our fiscal year. Thus far, the general fund revenues exceeded expenditures in the amount of $2,669,660. This excess is related to anticipated interest revenue, which is, I think we had budgeted at, bear with me just a second. Our interest was budgeted at, where is it at? There we go. I'm sorry, $640,000. We're already at almost $900,000. So it's that, and then we also have debt service that was not transferred yet for the month of June, or for the month of June. The ad valorem year-to-date revenue was $8,049,547, which is 80% of the budget. Debt service fund reflects revenues exceeding expenditures in the amount of $1.7 million, approximately. Staff corrected a sales tax revenue error that was identified in the previous quarter, and the revenue was recorded in this fund, which was an error, and it's been corrected as of this quarterly report. The debt service payment for principal and interest has not been made yet, which is what makes up to $1.7 million. Capital projects fund reflects revenues exceeding expenditures in the amount of $4,541,072. An error was identified in the last quarter where bond revenues that were supposed to be under the water fund were placed in this fund. That transfer took place at the end of July, and you'll see it in the fourth quarter financials. Utility fund revenues exceed expenditures in the amount of $3.9 million. Water revenue year-to-date is $4.1, which is 94% of the budget. Sewer year-to-date revenues is $3.5, which is 77% of the budget. The stormwater expenditures exceed revenues in the amount of $134,000. Stormwater revenues year-to-date is $603,000, which is 74% of the budget. The golf course revenues exceed expenditures in the amount of $1.6 million. The revenues include a venue tax collection of $1.2 million, which is 86% of the budget. Staff is still currently working on getting the bank reconciliations completed for the golf course. We'll have all the revenues and expenditures recorded prior to the end of the fiscal year. What I can say on a positive note is that we've completed all the reconciliations for all of the other bank accounts. This is the only one that's pending to be completed. The investment report includes the beginning and ending balances as well as interest earned monthly for all bank accounts. The accounts listed as operating and savings are fluid and have significant activity throughout the month. We have identified any activity that might be considered material changes to the account balances. And as noted in the first and second quarter, the Series 2022 Water Work and Sewer System Revenue Bonds proceeds of $4.5 million was deposited into the general fund Go Bonds account. We transferred that again as of July 2023. And I stand for questions.
Any specific comments to Christine? Yes, Mr. Vaughn.
I have just a few quick questions. You already answered them basically in this presentation, three of them. I just want to make sure I understand them. So the general fund currently is running a surplus at around 2.6 million-ish, give or take a little bit. Is that a fair statement?
It's fair with the exception that we have not transferred out many monies that still need to be transferred out, which is the debt service monies, as well as the fact that the revenue for the interest was so high.
So
at least 1 million, yes, sir.
At least 1 million.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
So there's a sizable surplus in the general fund.
Yes, sir.
The water and sewer fund is showing almost $4 million surplus. It has some debt payments to make, but they're still fairly significant. I'm reading your paragraph that says utility fund revenues exceed expenditures in the amount of $3.9 million.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And the golf course has 1.6.
Yes, sir.
Which about 1.3 of that's venue tax.
Well, you have to consider too, we've got $650,000 that still needs to be transferred to sewer for holes 8 and 9 drainage. it has to go to stormwater, I'm sorry, for holes 8 and 9 drainage. And it currently, well, forgive me, I don't know as of this date, I believe it still owes the general fund about $500,000.
Sure, and there's more revenue possibly to capture
Yes,
because you haven't reconciled the bank
Yes,
statements.
sir.
It could be even higher than that.
Yes, sir.
The only other question I had on the financials was, just looking at this, it looks like the Parks Department's already blown their annual budget. Do you have any comments on that? Or?
Yes, sir. In December of 2022, my predecessor brought a budget amendment to the fiscal year 22 budget, reducing the expenses for the parks at $370,000. What she did not do is increase the expenditure line item for this fiscal year by that $370,000. So if you take that away from what they've already spent, and then you divide it by the number of months, we're at about 75% of what they should spend. So I can either come to council and bring a budget amendment, or we can leave it the way it is, and just bottom line will still be okay.
Okay, but we did not approve a budget amendment to increase 2023 expenditures, but we did go ahead and spend it, is what you're saying?
No, sir. I'm saying it was never brought to you for 2023.
Right, it was specifically asked if it was going to be brought, and they said that it might be brought at the meeting that we approved the 2022 budget amendment, but it was never brought. So we never approved an increase in the line item for Parks, but Parks is spending it, is what you're telling me.
We're saying that right now they're over budget, we should do a budget amendment for them.
Right, so they spent money we have not authorized for 2023.
They spent money over their budget, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Amen.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Buck?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you, for the non-CPA guy at the table, for the other 5, 6 of us that are not the CPA, when you say that revenues are exceeding expenses by, in some cases, several $1 million, does that mean that I want to make sure that I understand that we are bringing in revenue that is above our expenditures?
Right.
Only because we haven't yet expended it?
That could be the case. It could also be that there are several positions that are not filled, so those salaries are going unspent. And when I first came in, because of the way the tax revenue is budgeted compared to what we had coming in as revenue, I asked staff to limit their spending for a few months. And that's been almost 6 months that they've cut back spending in order to try to get us in line with where we needed to be.
Specifically, you said that you wrote in here that the utility fund revenues exceed the expenditures in the amount of $3.9 million. That's a significant amount of money.
Yes, sir.
Is that money going to be spent? Help me understand why.
Well, we still have the bonds that have to be paid for the utilities.
Okay, so it's money that will still be paid.
Yes, and you have to remember too that this is as of June. So a lot of those monies have already been spent from that date to this date. Unfortunately, trying to get the audit complete and get us caught up on the reconciliations, these financials are behind by a few months.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure for myself, to make sure that I understand it completely, that all my right honorable colleagues up here understand it as well, and also for the members of the public that are hearing this, that they're going, wait, you brought in $3.9 million more than you budgeted? Wait, what?
No, I understand. It's just unfortunate that, and it's not an excuse, but coming in, there were a lot of corrections that had to be made for the audit. Now that those are done, and we're trying to get through the budget now, at some point, the finance staff wants to bring these to council on a monthly basis instead of a quarterly basis. It's much more transparent, and it gives a better picture of where the city is actually at. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Anyone else? All right, this does require a motion. For the third quarter financial report, so I do need a motion and a second.
Move for approval.
Councilmember Vaughn makes the motion. Do you have a second?
Second.
Pro Tem Goolsby. Any further discussion? All right, call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Buck.
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman. Aye. Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Motion passes. Let's go ahead and take a short break, and we'll reconvene here close to a little after 8 o'clock as we can. Thank you very much. Please be patient, because we're going to get started on the budget and the tax rate right after we take our break. All right, we're going to reconvene. Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and reconvene our meeting. We'll move now to another no tab, which is to conduct a public hearing on the FY 2023-2024 budget. This is the second hearing on this. We actually discussed it and voted on it 2 weeks ago, but now is the opportunity to have a public hearing where we can hear from also members of our citizenry. So how do you feel about it then? Then we'll discuss and consider the approval of that. Then we'll go to another public hearing on the tax rate. So that's the way the process goes. So is there anything else that staff would like to add to before we open up the public hearing? You have a short presentation?
Yes, sir. It's really short presentation. I'll make it as quick as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the budget for the fiscal year 2024, sorry, okay. That's gotta be what it is. So for the general fund, it actually has 14 departments. And the revenue is budgeted right now at $19,285,581. Of that, $14,259,819, or at least 74% of the budget, comes from tax revenues, which are ad valorem, sales tax, and franchise fees. I have to click it twice, unfortunately. Forgive me, this is the first time I used Prezi, and I'm having issues trying to figure it out. So the general fund highlights are actually for the all staff salaries include a 3% COLA and a 2.5% step on the employee's anniversary date. That's for all the funds, general fund, utility, golf, stormwater. A new department was created for human resources, and a part-time HR assistant was added. The budget for the human resources manager was moved from the finance department to the HR department. Parks and Recreation Department added a full-time herb tech position. The Police Department added a full-time CID officer and a vehicle for this officer. The Fire Department added a new firefighter position. So our expenses equal the revenues at $19,285,581. And of that, 43% of it is public safety, 12% is for the non-departmental, and 10% is general services. The other 37% is what covers the 10 other departments. Now, and again, thank you, and again, thank you. All right, so general fund debt service, the total was $2,147,750. Revenues from ad valorem with the de minimis rate would be $1,750,623. And we'll be using fund balance of $388,377. And if you look, those are the go bonds that it's actually going to be covering. The date that comes after the amount is the date that the debt is paid in full. The general fund capital improvements revenues are $5,986,714. Of that is bond revenue of $5,020,310. CDBG grants of $678,394, and an estimated interest of $288,010. And then the expenditures are listed below. This is also a zero balance budget. So the enterprise fund consists of utility fund, stormwater, and golf course. The utility fund has 4 departments. Its revenue is estimated at $16,327,251. Total expenditures are equal to that. And if you look, it's broken down by department, non-departmental, development services, and capital projects. Stormwater only has the 1 department. Its revenues are estimated at $2,105,839. This is a transfer from the golf course of $1.1 million. $650,000 has been budgeted in this fiscal year. For next fiscal year is $450,000 to cover again holes 8 and 9 drainage project. Golf course revenues by department are listed here. It's $1.3 million for general admin, and this is where the the venue tax revenue is recognized. Course and grounds has no revenue. Pro shop has limited revenue that comes in, and it's estimated at $144,000. The range $100,000. Food and beverage $833,000, and marketing $112,000. The $112,000 for marketing is actually a transfer from the hotel motel tax revenue, and then the expenses are there. Thank you. So special revenues. Special revenues are those those funds that require to be maintained in a separate fund. We have at least 3 that are court related. They are court technology, court security, and child safety. They have minimal revenue that comes in. The expenditures for court technology are expected to be pretty close to what the revenues are. Court security, we may end up with about $12,000 surplus, and child safety, about $10,000 surplus. Seized assets is for federal and state seized items. Chapter 59 is the state, and equitable sharing funds that come from the federal government are going to be budgeted here. We haven't received very much in the past few years, so I tried to keep it very minimal, and that's pretty much only the interest that may be earned on the accounts. The expenditures are just if the police department ends up having a minimal expenditures that they have. Capital replacement fund is where the revenues that were over in the general fund of $398,000 is being transferred. The reason we're trying to transfer it there is because after we do a budget amendment to move the 1.9 that came from the golf course to this fund in order to cover the fire trucks, $315,000 is required annually for us to be able to pay the fire trucks off in cash. We wouldn't have to have any type of financing for that. So we're just trying to be forward thinking in that, which is why we budgeted here under the capital replacement. Also in there is the $225,000 revenue that comes from CPS 1%, and then there's the excess of $157,000 that was not budgeted from the monies that were brought from the golf course to the general fund for venue tax, or for parks. And then the utility fund is just utility fund capital replacement, which is $5,000.
We've got to have the public hearing before we enter. We'll come back. Yeah.
Okay, so the other ones are PEG, hotel motel, the ARPA funds, and the venue tax. PEG, we're estimating $135,000 in revenue, $25,000 expenditures. Hotel motel approximately $176,000 with $162,000 in expenditures. Again, $112,000 of that goes to the golf course for marketing. The ARPA has already been allocated. We'll come back to council in October with where we're at with our spending and what we have remaining to possibly reallocate. And with the venue tax, again, the revenues we're expecting to be 1.753, thank you. And the expenditures will be $1,750,000, which again is allocated between the golf course and the general fund. And last but not least are impact fees. They are not required to be in a separate fund, but it's easier and more transparent for us to have them allocated here in order to, if a contractor ever came to us and wanted to know how those monies were spent, we would be able to tell them this is where the revenues came in and this is where it came out, instead of having them placed in the utility fund. And that should be it.
Okay, what I'm going to do, again, the process is I'll open up a public hearing for comments from you all about what you just saw. This was presented to us a couple of weeks ago, and that was our first vote on that. We had to do that for a public record to be recorded. And now I'll open up the public hearing at, actually 8:15. And would anybody like to address council on a particular budget? Yes, Mr. Rubel, sir?
I thought there were two. And Mr. Murphy, you did me the favor on getting close. I can't see up there.
That's okay. You're good.
Give me 1 minute warning, that's all right. I appreciate it, thanks, sir. We fail still to differentiate for council earned income from total revenue, particularly with regards to golf course. So, for example, correctly said, there is a $1.602 million excess of revenue over expenditures, but that includes venue tax. Also, it does not include, when you look at the numbers for the third quarter earnings, essentially the $310,000 that's listed separately, but if you'll notice a little bit later on in your budget sheet, there are big blank zeros there. So that's going to get added probably at the end of the year and things will come up, but you do not have an earned income from the golf course of $1.6 million. It just, your numbers don't make sense. They're different in different sheets, okay? So basically, I encourage you, before you move forward on capital improvement programs that will ultimately, including tab D expenses from January this year, will ultimately be in excess of the build cost of the original golf course building. I encourage you to move that new venue, okay, to the voters for approval. So expenses for capital improvement, for all the things that need to be done that haven't been done on the golf course that you're looking for, please take that to the voters. Please report earned income to the voters. Also, you have $1.2 or $1.5 million in savings. Let's move that from the golf course. Let's move that now. We won't have any budget problems this year. Also, I noticed that venue tax is added differently in different parts of the budget presentation. Where is the venue tax that's going back to fuel the general fund in relief of the parks? That's easily in excess of the budget, the excess budget requirements that this council is deliberating on. So I'm very confused by, and I know it's third quarter and things aren't quite complete, but essentially I think council needs to know the difference between earned income and the tax revenue incomes that's added and everything pulled together, hopefully before you really understand what you're voting on and put us in long-term debt. The other thing that's just somewhat inconsequential, but when you look through your package, you're going to find that things like there's a difference in where positions are added in your package. Whether the health care officer or something like that is added in the fire department and in some parts of your documentation and in the police department, the other parts of your documentation. You'll also note that in your documentation, you'll find the detective is responsible for essentially dispatch. They're the supervisor for dispatch, okay? And you go, a detective responsible for dispatch, they're not even there 24/7. Why is it that the watchmaster or whatever you call them type thing? That had no sense in your documentation. And you're adding a fourth detective, I remind you,
Mr. Rule, we're getting close.
Thank you. And that fourth detective, when you look at budgets, does not change over time at all from the police department. Okay, so there are a number of issues associated with the budget for the paperwork that's been presented as an agenda attachment that I hope you're able to clarify in the budget process, particularly when you vote for taxes. Hopefully I'll address that over there.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Anyone else on the budget? All right, this is your opportunity. What I'll do is I'll close the public hearing now at 8:21, and we'll go then to tab number F, which is to discuss and to consider approval of the FY23-24 budget. Now it's council's opportunity to interact. Again, this is the second version of this
I move we approve the budget, changing the tax rate to 0.505, reducing the general fund property tax revenue accordingly, and then taking that from the transfer to the capital replacement fund.
You can't do that.
Unfortunately, they have to be approved separately.
Well, it's in the budget, so I don't want to adopt the budget with the tax rate that's in the budget. So you're telling me I can adopt the budget without the tax rate? Is that a fair statement? Okay. Well, then I move we adopt the budget, reducing the tax by $200,000 and reducing the transfer of the capital replacement fund by $200,000.
Second.
All right, let's make sure we got this proper motion. Would you restate it again, Phil?
I move we adopt the budget, reducing the property taxes in the general fund by $200,000 and reducing the transfer to the capital replacement fund by $200,000.
Okay, that's his motion.
Second.
Okay, that's his second. All right. Now we opportunity for more discussion because we have a motion now and a second. Yes, Mr. Vaughn.
I just want to say that I think we should compromise on the tax that's in the budget, and that a compromised tax position, I'm not going to say the word rate because I don't want to get yelled at, is really in the best interest of the people. It still would be a tax increase. It would reduce how much is going to the capital replacement fund, but that's just extra in the budget. That's a bonus. I'd highlight the financials that we just heard and the significant surpluses we're generating this year. It's a small, very small part of our budget. It's about $200,000, but it's a big deal to the taxpayers, and it's a big impact to our businesses and our residents. We're still not competitive with our neighbors on taxes, and I think this rate, just to recap where we're at, the city amended the budget with the 517 rate, which allowed them to pay for the new roof for $550,000, so that's in there. The only thing that this would impact is that transfer that's going to the capital replacement fund. It would just be a little bit less than the $398,000 that we're sticking over there. So I think it would be a good compromise based on what we've heard tonight, based on the discussion that was at the last meeting. I think it would be wise. So thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Bowman.
So yeah, going off of that, I mean, 9 different people came out to guide your council, and every single one of them were in favor of a lower tax rate. Separate from those 9 people, I received 10 emails from different people that were not at Guide Your Council that were all in favor of a lower tax rate. Tonight, 9 members spoke tonight about possibly wanting a lower, tax. And so I firmly believe that before we adopt this budget, we need to change the amount so that we're really thinking about all the people who came out and spoke and the businesses before we just adopt a budget and then we're a little bit in trouble because it's got the higher tax in it. That's it for me.
All right, Mr. Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Vaughn, I'd like to give Ms. Green an opportunity to kind of highlight what would sort of a counterpoint, what would be the impact to the city if we were to move forward with what my right honorable colleague Vaughn has proposed.
It would reduce the tax revenue by about $212,000. Again, we moved the money to the capital replacement in the hopes that we would not have to have any financing in 4 years when we get the fire trucks. If we keep it consistent with about $300,000 being deposited into it for the next 4 years, then we won't have any money out of pocket for the city or any type of financing required to get the fire trucks when they're delivered.
And that was actually the question that I was going to ask in your presentation, was about the fire trucks.
Mm-hmm.
When we said that the option of self-financing would be better, paying cash, by taking that money from the golf course that was going to be paid back into the general revenue fund and investing it at a particular rate of return would result in a better financial deal for the city than it would be to have financed the fire trucks.
Yes, sir.
What have we done, or what are we planning to do as that investment vehicle? Have we given that any thought yet, since we talked about it about
2 months ago, a month and a half, 2 months ago. What is our plan
Was I involved in that conversation?
for investing that money that's going to come from the golf course so that we can reach that targeted
Yes,
rate
sir.
of return?
The 1.9 million will be deposited into a separate account. The 398,000, if council approves it, would also be deposited there. It'll continue to earn interest over the 4 years. So if we save about $300,000 per year, we won't have to do any financing for the fire trucks.
So I'd like to ask Mr. Vaughn if you could respond in just a moment. What's your counterpoint? What are we proposing that we're not going to set aside that much money for the fire trucks, or what exactly would be the impact specifically, rather than just we're going to reduce the money? Where would we take that money from? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
There's a misunderstanding about the fire truck money. So the 1.9 million that the golf course owes the general fund is already in the general fund. It doesn't have cash. It has an IOU asset.
No, sir, it's been transferred.
Well,
Forgive
maybe
me.
today.
Okay.
So I'm talking about the 2022 audit, which is where the final numbers were for last year. The golf course owed money to the general fund. It's already in the general fund as an IOU asset. So when you pay it off, the general fund's not any better than it was, except that it has cash instead of an IOU. All that is counted in our reserves. If we spend that 1.9, that's going to reduce our reserves in the general fund, our fund balance, what's left in the general fund. So it'll take us below the 12 months. So just because the golf course pays off the general fund does not change the reserves that we had in the general fund. Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
So that's not going to help us pay the fire trucks. It gives us more cash, and we can choose to use our reserves if we want to buy the fire trucks. That's an option that we can take. But it's going to take more than $300,000 a year to pay for the fire trucks. It's 3.1 million. That's we're going to need about 3 years. Even if we get the 1.9 and we add the 300,000 on top of it, we can do that. That's certainly fine, but that's going to take us below our fund balance. So that's a decision that we would have to make as a council to say, let's spend our fund balance. So the 300,000 that they're putting in the capital replacement fund is not going to get us there in 3 years to be able to buy those fire trucks.
I think it's a misunderstanding, sir. The $1.9 million would be placed in the capital replacement fund.
Which would have to come out of the general fund because the general fund has a receivable right now.
It would not affect the fund balance. We still should have the 12 months of fund balance.
How do you calculate fund balance?
You calculate fund balance by the full year. We have to have 12 months to cover any type of expenditures that are not required.
Right.
So they're only required.
But if you want to know what is the fund balance in the general fund, how would you calculate the fund balance? The actual balance in the general fund, how would you calculate it?
How would you calculate fund balance? You would
Yes.
take current assets and subtract current liabilities.
Okay. So are you saying the IOU from the golf course was not an asset for the general fund?
No, sir, not in that
It's
calculation.
not on our audit report. It's never been reported on there.
We're discussing two separate things, and no, sir, it's not there.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to disagree on this
And that's
because
fine.
that's fine.
It
but
wouldn't be
is
the
already
first time,
in the general
so.
fund. It's already in the general fund, and so if we want to spend it, that's up to us. But it would take us below our 12-month fund balance policy.
But there is no intent whatsoever to go below the 12-month fund balance policy. We've already agreed to that.
Yes.
Which means that we don't have money for the fire trucks.
Well,
financing is going to have to be a part of it. I don't see how we're going to come up with $3 million in 3 years, unless we want to do a giant increase in property taxes.
Well, no, so you have the 1.9, and then you have approximately $311,000 for a 4-year period, which comes to the $3.1 million. Plus interest is in there, which I hadn't considered. But again, what council decides is what we have to do. That was just our idea. It was just a projection, thinking that might be a way to mitigate any type of need for debt, is all.
It's not actually an option, but that's okay.
Right. Yes, Mr. Gov't.
Sorry, I really wish that we could just have a free flow back and forth, but it would probably devolve into people talking over each other. Can you explain how we are going to pay for the fire trucks? Because Councilmember Vaughn has a point. If we're only putting $300-something thousand aside, sorry, and I'd like to have the interaction with you so that you can help me understand, because he makes the point that if we're only putting aside $300,000 per year, and we have 1.9, which will pay for one of the fire trucks, I think the ladder truck, and then the pumper truck was gonna be about 1.5, if I remember correct, something like that, for the total of 3.1.
Mm-hmm.
How are we gonna get to that 1.5 to pay for the fire truck, and when is that bill going to come due? When are we gonna have to pay for it?
If you take 3.1 and you subtract your 1.9, that leaves you 1.2.
Okay,
1.2 divided by 4 is $300,000.
yes. And when do we have to pay for that pumper truck?
4 years to deliver. I'm sorry. 15 what?
40 months on the ladder, 50 months on the
Approximately 48
1
months.
month on the first one, 52 months on the second one.
So we are we going to be a little bit short in not having quite enough money?
We should be fine.
No, because we haven't calculated interest.
Exactly.
Aha.
The current interest rate, that's.
And then we're only going with 1.9. That's not the total amount that was actually due to the general fund, or due to the general fund. It's a little bit more than that.
Okay.
We're
Very
just
well.
rounding it.
Thank you. I have the information I need. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Anyone else? We do have a motion now as presented by Councilmember Vaughn, seconded by Councilmember Bowman. So, yes, Ms. Fitzpatrick.
I just was hoping Christine could talk, when we're proposing reducing it by the 200,000 and the 200,000, can you walk me through your reaction on how you feel like that's going to impact the budget? If we're going off the motion that was just made by Councilmember Vaughn.
Councilmember Vaughn is right. It would reduce it by about 212,000. So then it would reduce the capital replacement fund by 212,000, which is something that, again, in the future, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to get for the fire trucks.
So what she's saying is that you either save for it now or you figure out how to pay for it.
Yeah. That's pretty much what it comes to. And if you really look at the reduction in the taxes per the property owners, anyone that's 65 or older is already frozen and locked in. So their taxes will not be increased. And for a person that has a $100,000 home, $100,000 value, well, let's say 300,000 because I think that's the average within the city of Universal City. It saves approximately $36 a month, or I'm sorry, a year. So,
just as a thought, my understanding though is that we're looking at the budget, not the tax rate. Like we're trying to approve the budget right now.
Yeah.
Yes, but as Councilmember Long pointed out, it's really hard not to discuss both at the same time because there is obviously an effect. So one of the reasons we do the budget first is in order to pass the budget, you set the tax rate for it. So typically you set your budget so you know what you set your tax rate at.
That makes sense.
Makes sense? Okay, Ms. Bowman.
Okay, so we're talking about $212,000. I just want to make this real clear for everyone up here in case you're not sure. 20-some people came up here and asked you to lower it a little bit. We're talking $212,000. But you've had the appeal of all of these people who've spent their time to come up here and talk to you and ask you to just lower it just a little bit. And you're talking $212,000 when we have millions in surplus in several accounts. And everyone had to cut back their expenses in life. But us as a city, we can't cut $212,000 to help out the people. I want you all to really think about that. Like $212,000 to help people who came out here and spoke. And yes, it's $36 here and but it's all adding up. It's $36 on your tax rate, but then 10% on your house, and then even more for your coffee and everything else that's gone up. I just want us to really consider this, that we're talking about $212,000 if we come down to 505. It just doesn't seem right, you guys. It just doesn't seem right. That's it.
Okay. Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, if I'm a senior, my rate is frozen. The amount that I pay is frozen.
Well, the only thing you could do is go down.
It can only go down.
Yes, sir.
I'll never pay more than that.
Sir.
So, wow.
In other words, if your property went from having a value of $100,000 and it went up to $200,000, you still would pay the same rate you paid at the $100,000 if you were in the 65 or older.
Okay, so that increase in value doesn't increase the payment, that number at all?
Not for those property owners that are 65 or older.
Okay, and then what I'm seeing is everybody talks about how everybody's paying more.
Yes.
Is the city paying
more? Are
their eggs cheaper than the eggs that I can buy at Walmart?
No, sir.
So the city's paying more as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In this budget, we went through and we talked about additional firefighters, additional police officers, additional staff to try to make this city run a little bit more efficiently. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And again, the public safety section of the city is almost 44% of our budget. The admin staff, Parks and Rec, what else is there? Admin, Parks and Rec, Finance, Development Services. All of those 10 departments equate to 37% of our budget. The rest of it is either public safety or it's non-departmental, which are things that we have to purchase, for instance, insurance and other items. Electricity for the building, water for the building. And then the other is general services, which is our streets. And that's kind of how it breaks down.
Okay.
But again, the $212,000 could very well be taken from the capital replacement. Then we'll just have to think in the future, how will we recover that as well?
And like I'm trying to teach my children is to save up as much as you can for those big ticket items. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. Is that, in your opinion?
We're trying to avoid having to get any type of financing or debt to the city. If it can be avoided, it's best to be avoided. Our job is to be stewards of public funds. And yes, I understand that it doesn't always look that way, but we have to consider every citizen of the city, not just those citizens that are property owners, not just those citizens that are business owners, but people that rent, for instance, people that are on the base. We have to consider everyone, and that's just the way it is. But our ultimate goal was to not have financing for the fire truck. But it's $212,000, as Councilmember Bowman said. So whatever council decides, we'll obviously work with. But you have to consider too that in the future, because things are going up, there is a possibility that the taxes will have to be raised next year. And just a correction to the debt service, we don't have the ability to just do whatever we want with it and go up and down as much as we want. We can only go as high as our debt due for that fiscal year. So if our debt for the fiscal year is $2 million, we can only go to the tax rate that would cover that $2 million. We can't exceed that. Like this year, it's 0.086, I think. So it'll stay at 0.08086, but the M&O has to be adjusted. If next year we have more debt, that will go up a little bit, which will increase the tax rate. And we'll have to again either come down on the M&O or go up on the total tax rate. Does that kind of make sense?
It did. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Jerry, we've not heard from you yet, sir.
Yeah, just real quickly, with the 212,000, we're talking about either using that now so we don't have any future hikes for the fire vehicle, or basically kicking that metaphor, kicking that can down the road to figure out how we're going to do that later.
I guess it's kind of like
we're basically just pushing it down the road.
Yes, sir. Paying Peter or robbing Peter to pay Paul. Thank you so much. Basically, is all it is. It's.
And I understand, and I would like to ask a question. We're talking about the 65 and over, and I could be totally wrong on this, but our adopted tax rate, our adopted rate for 2023 was .54.
0.54.
444, or did we, yeah, 00.
The goals
And, yeah, the goals. And goals for 2021, if we do this, is looking at .517 or 99. And for a layman, that, you know, I understand that revenues are going up, but at the same time, this proposed tax rate is going down. So with that, the 65 and over, it goes down.
There's
If
that
I'm missing-
possibility.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, but I couldn't guarantee it without looking to see. But there's a possibility, depending on the tax value of their property.
My point being, it can always go down,
Yes, sir.
but it can't go up.
It does not stay down. For instance, if it were to go down $200 this year, and then next year the rates were to go up, they would go up to their ceiling. Which, if it was $500, they would go up to that $500. And then if again it dropped down, they'd go down to $300. But if it went back up, they could very well go back up. But they would never go past that $500.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, it's Mr. Vaughn.
Just a final comment. We did just raise our budget water and sewer 3%. And later on this agenda, we're probably going to have to raise our garbage another 8%. So this is just more on top. And it's still an increase. We're still getting about 3% more on most homeowners that are not frozen if we did the reduction in the property tax revenue, as opposed to a 5.6% increase on the rate that we have currently in the budget. So, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Ms. Bowman.
And I just want to point out too, like, there's things in this budget that we could have easily sat here all night and go through every line by line on that budget that's in there. But like things like the $200,000 developmental plan for the city, like what we want to do with the city, even though we had a previous one that may not have been as thorough, that was only clocking in at $15,000 to $20,000, but yet this year we're asking for $200,000. I mean, there are things in this budget that are bloated and not necessarily that we could easily pick and choose certain things as opposed to others to come up with that $212,000 that we're talking about. It's not like you're taking away, that's what I'm saying. Like, there are things in this budget, if we were going to sit here and go line by line, there are things that we could say, well, we might not necessarily need this, we might not necessarily need that, because it's not a need for next year. It's not something that we have to have immediately where we could help out the residents, as opposed to just adding on to everything that's being increased. And yes, the city has to make increases too, and the city has to pay more too, but the city also should have to cut back a little bit too if needed, because that's not fair. Like, everyone else had to cut back. Why should we not have to cut back a little bit and really identify what our needs and our wants are, as opposed to just saying, oh, we're just going to hike this up to 517.
But Councilmember Bowman, we did cut back. We cut back significantly in order to get to the budget we're at. And if the council doesn't want to do the plan, yeah, we don't, that's fine. That's why we went line item by line item when we presented in July.
Yeah.
So if there's something within the budget that council doesn't want, we can remove it from the budget.
I agree.
We can take the $212,000. Just consider what will happen in the future. How do we then finance it as all? It's just, how do we continue to go forward and have that money available when it is available? Because our salaries for our staff, although they might seem inflated, if you look around and you do a market analysis of the salaries for the position, specifically for the layman positions, they're not earning very much money compared to other cities. I know Cibolo pays significantly higher than what the city of Universal City pays, but they're in a different situation too. They have a lot more taxes that come in. They could probably handle everything off just their sales tax. Just consider what's going to happen in the future. That's really all staff is asking. It's that just consider how we could in order to be sure that we're not struggling to figure it out when we get those fire trucks delivered is basically it.
Like I said, I agree. I just think that we kind of are making things a little more dire than they truly are, because like I said, there are things in that budget that were more needs than wants. And, you know, the next one of the other agenda items is literally that we're getting, you know, $437,000 more than, you know, from property tax revenue, and everyone's taxes are gonna go up again next year, and like, that's what I'm saying, like, I think, I'm just, like I said, I've never hidden who I am, I just really care about the people, that's it, like, when all these people come to me and send me these heartfelt emails, and this is just breaking them apart, I get very emotional, because it just seems very flippant to me, it seems like it's not fair, it seems like, you know, people care. This was a very packed meeting. This was a ton of people who came and spoke. It just seems very unfortunate to me is all. That's it.
Ms. Christopher.
One of the things I want to point out is that during the budget meetings, when you guys were presenting the budgets, we actually voted as a group to add $400,000 in expenses to the budget, which we're effectively at this point talking about backing out. And I feel like all of us are feeling the pinch of the inflation and all of those things. The city is, the community is. We came here, we had several meetings talking about the things that we wanted to do, trying to cut back. I know that you guys have made some cuts because you walked into a situation where the previous finance director did not allocate things properly, and we've kind of been playing catch up. I don't want to take responsibility for pushing how we're going to pay for the fire truck down. That's a significant amount of money that I would hate to see pushed down. I like being a part of, I'm doing my part this year to make sure that that's being able to be paid for in 4 years and 5 years. So I just think that those are important things to think about. That's my point. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Vaughn, you made the motion. Do you have on observation?
I just want to make one comment that everything that we added in July is still in the budget. And then when we adopted this higher tax rate, it added more to the budget. It added the roof that was not discussed in July. That was $550,000. And then it added this transfer to the capital replacement fund of $398,000. So all we're talking about is that continued growth since July. Maybe we can back off a little bit of that by 212, still get everything that the city asked for, except for maybe a diesel mechanic. And if we want to take that 198 that's left over and make it a diesel mechanic, fine. But we don't need all that extra. We already got everything that we asked to put in still in there. So
okay, let me get a clarification here. When you proposed the budget a couple of weeks ago that we approved, that was based on, and you based it on the de minimis rate. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the 5.17. That was the budget that we actually effectively approved for publication was based on that 0.517. So that's what you built it on. So if we go below it, that will affect the overall budget, and we can work within it. You will work within it if you need to.
Yes, sir.
I think the whole point of being is, do we want to go to that level? Which is perfectly. This is up to you, council. This is your decision. This is your call. And remember, I argued for the fact that we should have. I would like to see a bit of a compromise position. The 5.17 seemed to be a compromise at the time, but it's still up to you guys to make that call. We're not at the tax rate yet. But we just need to go for the budget. So what we have before us now is a motion and a second to, if you want to restate it again, Phil, before I call for the vote.
Sure. So we've adopted 2024 budget as presented, reducing the general fund property tax by $212,000 and reducing the transfer to the capital replacement fund by $212,000.
Okay, so that's the motion that's before us, and it's been seconded by Councilmember Bowman. So I think it's time for us to close the discussion. I think we've had a lot of discussion. Everybody's had a chance to comment on this. So I'll go ahead now and call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby.
No.
Councilmember Buck.
No.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
No.
Councilmember Najarian.
No.
All right, the motion is defeated by 4-2 vote. So that puts back on the fact that we still do not have an approved budget at this time, so we need to take another look at this.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the budget as presented.
All right.
Second.
Motion to approve the budget presented by Councilmember Buck, second by Councilmember Fitzpatrick. There's still open. Discussion is open. That's our motion now to approve the budget as was presented and originally approved by Council couple of weeks ago. Any discussion by anyone else? All right, I'll call for that vote then, please.
Councilmember Gov't?
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby?
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman?
No.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn?
No.
That's a 4-2 vote in favor of the budget as it was originally presented. Okay, so let's move on then to public hearing, which is tab number 5, on proposed tax rate to support that 2023, 2024 budget. And I'll open up the public hearing unless there's anything else that staff wants to bring up before we open up the hearing on the rate. Okay, good. All right, let me go ahead and open up the public hearing. It is now, what, 8:50? And open up the public hearing. Mr. Ruval, please, sir.
It was the mental health officer that's been misplaced between the fire department, police department, and the records back and forth. Should be here tonight. I disagree with Councilman Woman that there's not a need for a comprehensive plan. I think there is, but I think it should address the long-term needs of financing for our city's fundamental requirements, not fluff, as it has been in the past. I would like council to consider how much tax revenue has been lost in all the lands acquired, for example, for the aviation district, and it's going to be 20 years before that gets built out. How much loss has council generated in tax revenue? I ask the council to consider the position that they put the city in by not taking the venue tax back to the voters and getting it put back in the general fund. You would not be in this position tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ruval. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Let's bring it to you. Let's bring the mic to you. Are you sure? We can bring it to you, Jim. No problem.
I'll be able to look in the eye. Okay, so first of all, congratulations. I don't know what to say. Anytime anybody has more money, they can find some place to spend it. And we can keep getting more money and keep finding more places to spend it. And the wish list keeps growing. Last year and this year, 3 weeks ago, it was all surplus. Then it got parked somewhere, so now it's no longer surplus. So y'all did a really great job. That's not what I came up here to talk about, because this hearing opened at 8:52. 8:52. And the reason everybody spoke during citizens to be heard, and not now, is because it is 8:52. Your legal notice says the hearing was supposed to start at 6:30. 3 years ago, Mr. Mayor, you, after one of the council meetings, came out and spoke to us, the peasants. And you explained to us how you held the items that were more of a larger number of people turned out for, the higher public interest, that you held them for the end of the agenda on purpose. Because you wanted us to be able to see how our council operated. With no thought whatsoever to the caretakers who are having to make arrangements to look after their kids, their parents, or their spouses, or even their dogs. But you want us to wait until the end. All the time you want us to wait until the end. I'm tired of waiting for the end. Okay? The people of this city do count. And it's time that you understood that. We are tired of waiting for the end. Thank you.
All right, would anyone else like to address the proposed tax rate?
While I'm here, I would just say, as far as the budget and the tax and everything we're talking about, the idea of if we need fire trucks, that makes sense. I mean, if that's something that we need, but it sounds a lot like we have just extra, and we're hoping in the future we're going to spend it on this. But there's no guarantee to a taxpayer and a citizen that's what that money's going to. So you're basically saying we're going use some of that, but we hopefully 4 years are gonna use that up for the fire truck. But there's no guarantee that we're gonna use that. It could get used for something else. So unless that money is actually allocated for a specific use, we are kicking the can down the road. Because what happens if something else comes up in 2 years from now, and that money needs to be used for something else? So if there's a specific allocation, such as fire trucks, let's make a budget item and say, let's save for this for the next 4 years. Doing an increase just in excessive, just to have extra funds to hopefully pay for something that's on a wish list later, has no accountability whatsoever. And that's just not, to your point of what you teach your kids, if you're going to take money from them and then you tell them you're going to buy them a toy in 4 years, and at the end of the 4 years you say, oh, I used it on something else. Kids don't respect you when you do that. So I would just say that. Keep that in mind, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing now at 8:58. And we'll go to then the discussion item, which is tab number G, resolution ratifying property tax revenue increase of $367,220 reflecting the fiscal year 2023 budget. That's the resolution.
Mayor, Christine had handed out that, which is actually a revision to what you just read.
Oh, a revision to it, okay. The total property tax revenue for the fiscal year 2024 budget be increased by $437,350, 4.50% over the property tax revenue for the fiscal year 2023 budget. So that's what's changed then on tab number G. So I'll open it up for discussion, or I'll be glad to entertain a motion and then follow with discussion.
I'll ask questions, Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me?
I'll ask questions. I have a question.
Okay, let's open up discussion.
Hey, Chief Perna, before you walk out, okay. I don't do this to embarrass anybody, but I wanted to ask you, have we ordered our fire trucks? When are they expected to be delivered, and why are we waiting for 3 years to get the fire trucks?
So that's everybody. So that's the problem.
I just wanted to give you an opportunity to explain and clarify that we're not just saving for the fire trucks, that we've already committed to buying them, and we have a 3-year wait for the fire trucks. So a 4-year wait for the fire trucks. So what we're doing now is allocating the funds in the budget to pay for that fire truck that we have firmly committed to buying.
So fire trucks are just like everything we talked about, that it's going up and up and up and up. So by us locking into that contract, the last time that I was here, we locked into that pricing. And now that we're locked into that pricing, no matter how much it goes up, it is what it is. It's just we're 4 years behind on them building trucks. So where we were seeing just municipal fire departments who were buying fire trucks, you've seen the creation of ESDs, and ESDs have just blown up, and they're supply and demand. They're ordering fire trucks faster than they can make them, so they're extremely behind in catching up. So the pucks that we ordered, which is a puck 107 stick and the engine,
in layman's terms, those are fire
50 months, 51 months, or 53 months on the ladder. We'll see the ladder in first, and the engine comes in behind that. So it is a huge process, and that's why we wanted to lock into that price. So we're not going to see that huge increase in the next few years as we're waiting.
One will be here in 3.5 years, and the other one will be here in about 4.5 years.
4.5 years.
Okay, awesome.
We locked in the price and avoided paying the interest charge either through the company who is selling them to us, or hopefully avoiding taking out a debt on the fire trucks in the future.
Cool. Thank you.
And historically, from what I have been talking with you based on payment plans, the city has always financed fire trucks in the past, but the HEO interest is.
I think we're very close to paying off for right now.
We had a 10-year loan on the last fire truck, and we're close to paying that off.
And this way, we're not gonna have to have a loan if we play it correctly. Good. Thank you, Chief Pun, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to explain from the last council meeting my no vote on the de minimis rate. I don't often invoke my military affiliation, but I will in this moment, only to say that when I ask my department head for my budget, and I tell him I need $300,000, let's say, my department head says, all right, you've asked for $300,000, you've clearly laid out what you plan to spend money on this year, I'm gonna give you your $300,000. He doesn't say I'm gonna give you $350,000 just in case things go up, right? If I have additional expenditures, I have to come back and ask for additional revenue. So my goal in proposing the 0.505 rate last 3 weeks ago that we had initially discussed as that compromise rate, sort of between the 0.59 and the de minimis rate, was my attempt to get us as close as we could to the exact amount of money that the city has asked for. I support the budget, obviously, as I just made the motion to approve it. But at the same time, my colleague, Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby, 2 years ago, when I was sitting out in the audience, he said during his comments that he would like very much to look the residents in the eyes and tell them that they've only taken as much money out of their pockets, because that's what we're doing. We're taking money out of your pockets, right? There's no two ways about it. I'd like to be able to tell the residents and look them in the eye and say, we've only taken out of your pockets that amount of money that we needed to take out of your pocket to fund this budget. Not a penny more. I know it's not an exact science. I know that it's kind of a shotgun blast in that general direction, but I'd rather fire from the shoulder rather than firing from the hip, if I can use a firearms analogy, to be as exact as I possibly can with that shotgun blast. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Mr. Vaughn.
This was just stated, we've never been able to pay cash for a fire truck. It's an extremely expensive proposition, and that's a big luxury that we're not really going to have. But even if we could, debt is not evil. I mean, a fire truck that you finance over 10 years, let's say it's $350,000 a year, 3 years out from now, we're going to have natural budget growth from then, especially when we have the 3 different apartment complexes coming on board, maybe something from Reunion. We're going to have lots of future revenue to help pay for that over that 10-year period for the fire truck. Setting aside money now is great, and that would be fantastic if we could pay cash for it, I suppose, but it's not how the traditional finance structure works, where you finance these giant purchases. So I don't think that's a good reason to raise the taxes now in the hopes that we're going to have a little bit of money to put a down payment on the fire trucks. But that's just my position. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. All right, before us is that we do have to take a way to act on this particular, ratifying the property revenue. And again, it's not 367,000, it's 437,350. So that's the motion before us now, not the rate. That's coming up next. So I do need a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby.
Second.
Second by Councilmember ADJOURN. Any additional discussion by anybody? All right, let me call for that vote then, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Councilmember Gov't.
No.
Councilmember Bowman.
No.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn.
No.
That is 3-3. Okay, I'll break the tie and I'll go aye. Move on now to Cabinet H. Discuss and to consider Ordinance 656D 2023, ordinance setting the ad valorem tax rate for 2023 at 0.517499 per $100 of appraised value and appointing a tax assessor collector. This is our first reading this evening. Okay, so we'll be opening up for discussion unless someone wants to make a motion, and we'll follow with discussion.
I move that the maintenance and operation tax rate be approved at 0.043, or 0.430945, and the debt service rate be approved at 0.086554. I further move that the total property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 0.517499, which is effectively 4.5% increase in the tax rate.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Fitzpatrick. Discussion? All right, let me call for that vote then, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Bowlsby.
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Bott.
No.
Councilmember Bowman.
No.
Councilmember Najarian.
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn.
No.
All right, that is a 3-3 tie. I'll break the tie and I'll vote yes, aye. Move on now to tab number I. Firebreak / fuel break requirement consideration. And just tell you, we cannot please everybody. We have to look out for 20,000 people in this community. It's a tough decision to make, and we're not going to please everybody. It's just the way we have to go about our business. Just thought I'd add that. All right, tab I is before us now.
So
Yes, ma'am.
can I, before he does this giant presentation, because I feel like it's not quite what, like we kind of brought this up for the Capana Ridge. Can I say my piece since it's not quite fully this? I mean, I have a resolution at the end, but okay. So bear with me, guys, because I was asked by the head of Capana Ridge, their HOA, to get this item addressed. They've been trying for over a year now to get a resolution to this issue. Ms. Thomas contacted the city and specifically Mr. Casada in September of last year when the developer of the land in front of them was not following the rules. The ordinance stated he must mow 100 feet and he was not. Mr. Casada and Ms. Thomas went back and forth on emails, and then in October, Mr. Casada got the developer who owns the property involved. I watched the November 1st city council meeting when this amendment was brought up, and honestly, I was very angry watching it. It feels very much so like this amendment giving the fire marshal control was literally made just to help this developer and hurt this neighborhood. Ms. Thomas did the correct thing. She contacted the city when the developer was not mowing the 100 feet that he was supposed to be mowing. The city then contacted this developer and didn't ask him to mow this 100 feet. Instead, the city brings this issue to city council and has council change the law saying the developer only has to mow 25 feet. However, the city failed to tell any of the council members that Capana Ridge directly brought up this issue in September and how this new ordinance would affect these residents. I'm equally angry because during that meeting, it seems like Councilman Buck knew that this subdivision was having issues and started to fight for them, but backed off when the city made it seem like the HOA didn't really matter as much as the developer. This ordinance passed because the city council did not have the full story. Ms. Thomas and the entire subdivision were not contacted that this ordinance was going to be up for discussion in November so they could effectively plead their case. Instead, the city took it upon themselves to change the rules that would negatively impact this neighborhood. The way this was done, in my eyes, is a disgrace. The city council was deceived, and this entire neighborhood was punished for bringing up a legitimate issue, which was originally not mowing 100 feet that he was supposed to be mowing per our rules. Instead of enforcing that 100-foot rule, the city went behind their backs and had council change the rule. This issue is so much bigger than a fire break. It's a public nuisance. These residents have had to hire pest control for rodents that live in these tall weeds, all because the city refused to enforce 100-foot mowing and then decided to have the city council change the rules. So now he only has to mow 25 feet. We have to do better. Council was not presented the whole story on November 1st, and now that they have the whole story, we need to make a change. I firmly believe that the ordinance should be amending, saying that the fire marshal can change the amount mowed if he talks to all parties affected by the mowing before changing the 100 feet to a new amount. So does that make sense? So I'm asking that the fire marshal can change it to 25 feet if they want, but they need to talk to everyone involved, not just the developer. They need to talk to all parties and ask them how they would feel about this only going from 100 to 25 feet. And that's it.
Okay. So is there anything Seth wants to add on to this?
Sure, we can give our presentation. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So I think the question comes, is this aesthetics or are we talking about safety? It sounds like people are conflating the two, and now they want both. Before it was aesthetics, and then they grabbed onto the safety component because they know that's why we looked at changing it. Next slide, please. So definitions of a fire break. There's Firebreak itself, which is Merriam-Webster's definition there. And the city code does fall back on Merriam-Webster when there isn't a specific definition in our code. Fuel break, which is defined by the 2021 International Wildland Urban Interface Code, which is a part of the ICC. This is what a fuel break is. Next question, or next slide. So, as you mentioned, there are two ordinances. There was the Ordinance 370P 2022, which did require 100 feet from the street and or residences on vacant 2+ acre properties. And then City Council did change that to allow the fire marshal discretion on a case-by-case basis. Next one, there we go. So the International Wildland Urban Interface Code, which the city did not adopt when we did adopt the ICC cycle in 2021, this basically gives the formula for when a fuel break or what a fire break, fuel break should be. And so it identifies in this code that there are three different types of three different areas. So basically your moderate hazard, your high hazard, and your extreme hazard. And then it identifies within that code the distance or what the fire break should be. So for example, the moderate hazard is a 30-foot fire break or fuel break. Next slide. So the reason I asked the first question, are we talking about aesthetics or are we talking about safety? Because the fire marshal is not looking at aesthetics. The fire marshal is looking at safety. And so the fire marshal, being the expert, should be the one that has the authority to make that determination. Next slide. So this isn't just related to one specific property. Obviously, we have to be equitable in our execution of the ordinance. And this map identifies all the 2+ acre properties in town that could potentially be impacted. We should add that the college is not included on this map, but should be. And so we're going to go through some pictures to give some examples of properties that would have to be mowed if you did reduce the requirement from what it currently is to back to 100 feet. So Capano Ridge, there's some pictures of what Capano Ridge looks like from Kitty Hawk, from the entrance drive, and we had someone stand there to provide some scale. It's not 6 feet, as has been suggested. Next slide. This is still Capano Ridge. Next slide. So across the street is the university or the college. And so the college would have to mow a significant amount of their property if we're going to treat them equitably. Next question, or next slide. So behind QT, you may be familiar with this property. It's behind QT, the car wash, and the coffee shop, and just in front of the apartment complex and next to the school. So that's a significantly large piece of property. And as you can see, they're currently doing a fuel break or / fire break, but they would be required to mow that entire property. Next slide. Another property that would be required to mow the entire property would be next to Metrocom, which is just off of 1604. And so, a couple of questions. Are we being arbitrary and capricious if we require this property owner to mow his property? And then why are we stopping at 2+ acres? I mean, what's the science behind 2+ acres? Why not 1+? That's a large property. Could be subject to a fire. And so you had mentioned that the desire from Capano Ridge from the HOA was to mow the entire property, or at least comply with the previous code that was a 100-foot distance. So if you can go 2 more slides, please. Here, I'll get it. This is what would be the result if they wanted to stick to the code, is the entire property would not be mowed. That's what it would look like. So by going back or reverting to that previous code, you're not accomplishing the desires or the wishes of the HOA. Again, we go back to then, is it aesthetics? Because that's what I was told. They didn't like the look because it was bringing down their property values in their estimation. And that's all we have.
All right, I'll go back to you, man.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm not saying revert it back. I'm saying those affected people should have a repercussion. It's not fair to change, it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem fair to that neighborhood or any place. So if you go to all those other properties and everyone that's affected that's touching that property is fine with their 25 break, if the college is completely fine since they're the only ones concerned, they don't have a neighbor that's right there, that's different. But I'm saying like this is, it just seems really poor timing, seems super unfortunate that we changed this because a group of residents came and spoke about this. And then we decided, hey, we'll just change this ordinance so that he only has to mow 25 feet. And I understand what you're saying is he would still not have to mow all of it. But I still think that that's just really not cool. Like I could understand being one of those 300 residents and being furious that I did the right thing and I messaged you and then we just changed laws at an opportune time to help this developer specifically so that we don't have to comply with not mowing all this. And I just because we say aesthetically in the beginning, they had pest control issues from the very beginning. They've been paying for rodent fees and all that for quite a long time. It may not have been brought to your attention, but I think they thought they didn't have to bring everything to your attention because they thought they were going to be taken seriously. And if someone wasn't following the rules, we were going to enforce those rules, not change the rules.
Sure. So what I had to inform the HOA rep and her husband when I invited them in and talked to them, laid out all the plats, explained everything to them as I identified in that email, was that they were in fact in violation because they were not following the plat. So they weren't mowing the portion that the HOA was responsible for in 2 areas.
Because they didn't know.
And why? So they should know.
They should, and they're now doing it.
So they brought that to our attention, and they have to mow the 25 feet from the fence line beyond into this property. That was the agreement that the developer, KB, made with the city that was approved by the city. Okay, and that is identified on the plats, all 7 plats for that subdivision. They're also responsible for maintaining that drainage area on the right-hand side in between the 2 yellow areas on the right. They didn't want to do that. So basically the impression they gave me when I spoke to them is that they didn't want to do anything and they wanted this guy to continue to manicure his entire property. And I believe that they also emailed all of the council members as well. So council was well aware of what was going on. They didn't copy us, but we know that council was emailed.
That is not what I was told. I asked.
Well, that doesn't surprise me based on the interaction.
Wow.
And Mayor, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. No, go ahead.
I know we keep saying the developer, so we have to name his name, Mr. Calvert, and he is here this evening, so I just want to let you know that he was not here when we had the citizen speaker. I had actually told him this item was going to be on the agenda later, and so he is here now. If you want to raise your hand so they at least know who you are, thank you.
And if he wanted to address anything with Mr. Calvert, I'll allow that, since he was not here at the time when he didn't realize it was going to be a little later discussion.
But I'm sorry, can I also say that the city staff tried to broker a meeting with the property owner and the HOA so they could come to some sort of an agreement? Because based on our interaction with this property owner, he was amenable to that. They didn't follow through. I'm sorry. And just because you don't get what you want doesn't mean that people aren't treating you fairly.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Mr. Calvert, would you like to address council? Please, come on up, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And thank you, Kim, for making me aware of this. First of all, I don't think it's accurate to call me the developer of the property. I'm the owner. There's a small group that owns this. We are, at the moment anyway, passive investors. It was property that was bought back in 2015, just with the intent just to hold it and let a developer come along. I have had some discussions about possibly developing the hard corner there at Old Cimarron Trail with a little retail center. We were thinking about moving forward with that. Interest rates went up, and we've just put that aside for now. But I have never asked the city for anything regarding this. I've never asked for any favors. I've never asked them to change anything. I have been completely willing to abide by whatever ordinances the city has. So it's inaccurate to characterize my motivations as trying to get something from the city, or trying to get a favor, or trying to get something changed, because that never happened. And in fact, in 2022, I think Mr. Casada called me up and said, "Hey, we have a problem. We have some complaints. This is regarding the 2.5 acre corner." And he said, "Would you mind? I know you don't have to, but would you mind mowing that?" And I said, "Sure. I'll do that." And so, I had a guy go out there and mow that 2.5 acre corner. I was not obligated to do that. I did that because Mr. Casada asked me if I would, and I did. So, I want to cooperate. I want to be a good neighbor. And I met with Denise, who's the president of the Homeowners Association, on October 7th at 11 a.m. at the property, last October 7th. We had a nice discussion. We kind of talked about the fact that, they have their 25-foot strip. They are legally, and is their obligation. I don't know why they weren't aware of it, because when anyone bought a house in that subdivision, they had to sign papers that said, we will abide by the HOA rules. And that was part of what they signed. Now, not everybody reads everything, that they're given, but they were all made aware of that. And it wasn't until, years later that they discovered that they had an obligation that they had not fulfilled yet. So we discussed that. And then I said, look, why don't you talk to the contractor that mows that big drainage ditch? And I've never seen them do that, but I imagine they come out with a big backwing, probably 15-foot shredder, behind a tractor. I imagine that's how they do that. And I said, look, Denise, find out from this contractor what it would cost, okay, when they come out to do all this other work. What is the delta? What is the difference between them just doing that work and then spending another 3 hours, which is probably all it would take, to mow the rest of it? Okay, they already have the equipment on site. All of that, mobilization cost is already kind of built in there. What's the extra expense to get that mowed? Let's find out what that is, and then we can talk about it. She said she agreed to do that. I've never heard from her since. So, I'm willing to work with the city. I'm willing to work with the homeowners. I want to be a good neighbor. I understand their desire to have, a manicured soccer field in front of their property, because when they bought their homes, that's what they had. Because KB Home was keeping that mode. To, you know, as marketing, you know, to make, keep it looking nice, okay? And that's, you know, that's what they do, and I get that. So, anyway, I think there's, you know, I just wanted to set the record straight on a few things, and, you know, let everybody know that I met with these people almost a year ago, and we had an understanding as to what they were going to do, what they were going to find out, and then come back to me and let's talk. And I've never had a phone call from them since. So that's where we are.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Palmer?
So unfortunately, she's not here, but she does tell it differently, is that you asked her to do that, but then you also said that you believe that they should pay for that. Like that, so there wasn't really a negotiation. She felt like you just wanted that cost and you wanted them to pay that cost.
No.
To mow it, is what she told me.
The reason that I asked her is because she said she wants me to pay for it, okay? And I'm like, well, I'm under no, you know, I mean, I'm not obligated to do that. But I tell you what, let's find out what kind of money we're talking about, and then we can talk, okay? So I wasn't, you know, I mean, the whole point of my asking her to find out what it cost, because if I wasn't going to pay for any of it, what do I care? The whole point of me asking her, what's it going to cost, is to say, let's find out what it's going to cost, and then let's talk, okay? Because I'm certainly open to cost sharing that, which is something I'm not obligated to do. But I'm willing, you know, I'm certainly willing to talk about that. But if this is something that the homeowners want, and I completely understand why they would want that, if that's something that they want, they should be willing to put a little skin in the game, okay? Because as it stands now, you know, I mean, I comply with everything that I'm asked to comply with, and I don't ask for anything, okay? And if the council decides that they want to, you know, pass an ordinance that says that I'm obligated to mow all of that, I'll comply with that. But as a taxpaying citizen, I will expect that ordinance to be equally enforced on every vacant lot across the city. And, you know, so that I'm not being singled out. And I think that's fair. So, anyway, I think it's unfortunate if Denise walked away from that meeting with the impression that, you know, I was telling her to go jump in the lake and I wasn't going to do anything, because the whole reason for me asking her, and I don't know who their contractor is, okay? The whole reason for me asking her that was to say, look, talk to him, ask him, he could probably tell you pretty quick, because it's not complicated. You know, you got another 3 hours out there on a tractor at $200 an hour, you know, at $600 or, you know, whatever.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you, and I appreciate you speaking, and I appreciate all of you listening to him as well. I think Ms. Bowman actually brought up a very good point, is that, you know, she was told one thing.
Yeah.
And he has said another thing, and really, both of them are complying now. The HOA is cutting this 5 feet. He has the property under control for the fuel break as he's required to do. This is really a private property owner issue, and I don't know why it's on the city council agenda. Because we as the staff felt what we needed to do to broker the agreement between the two of them as private property owners, or between the HOA and a group of private property owners. They couldn't come to an agreement. And, you know, I'm sorry for that. I hope, you know, at some point in the future they can get back together and work this out, which is what we had hoped for in the first place. Thank you.
I think my main issue is not against this property owner or even those people. I think my issue is that we brought up an ordinance and we gave fire marshal, control, but no one really thinks about the consequences of all those other properties, like just letting them know, like, hey, you're not going to have 100 feet anymore. Like, you're getting 25 now, and is this going to be an issue? It's the same thing the city always has. It's transparency and communication. Like, we're not being transparent. We're not communicating the way we need to communicate to our residents. And so I think if we were telling these people and knocking on their doors and saying, hey, we're taking this from 100 feet to 25 feet, it might be a little bit different because they might actually have, but instead it feels like we just kind of slid an ordinance in, and it still really bums me out that we did that, and it just doesn't sit kosher with me. I'm done now.
Mr. Warren?
I guess my question is if the property owner didn't request the change in the ordinance, why did you guys bring us the change in the ordinance to make a special arbitrary case in this example? I don't understand.
So one of the reasons behind that is, if we go back to this slide, like I said, we're going to have to equally enforce the ordinance. And so at that time, we used that as an opportunity to revisit the science behind the ordinance as it was written. So my question was, okay, so why do we have a 100-foot fuel break or fire break? What's the point of that, right? Because in other communities where I've worked, it was not 100 feet. It was basically what you saw at, it was 25 to 40 or 50 feet. It really depended, right? Because the fire marshal would say, look, this makes sense based on, the likelihood of a certain level of fire. And so this will protect the passersby on the road as well as the adjacent homes. So that was one reason. We look at all the properties that would be affected. That would be a code enforcement nightmare. And I know, based on past experience, that if I start sending letters out to all of those people, all of those property owners, it's going to go to you guys real fast. They're not going to be happy. Okay, so as always with code compliance, staff is caught in the middle when we have neighbor wars, right? And we try to mediate those as best we can up front by giving everybody all the information, which is exactly what I did with the HOA president and her husband, okay? And then I sent that email out to encapsulate, memorialize what we had talked about, okay? I did not get a response that council got from her. She didn't do me that favor, okay? So that's neither here nor there. We're talking about everyone that would be affected. He gave us the opportunity to reevaluate that. We talked to the fire marshal and the fire chief at that time, and yes, it makes sense. And we're justified by looking at that wildlife urban code that is part of the ICC. It says a moderate fire area or moderate hazard should be 30 feet. This is 25 feet. We want to make him cut 5 feet? Okay, you guys let us know. Again, we're going to follow whatever you guys tell us to do. But we're trying to make it a reasonable or rational, pragmatic decision.
But it sounds like we're creating an arbitrary system where we're going to enforce 100 feet on somebody else, and he's going to say, well, this property owner didn't have to do 100 feet. Why are you making me do 100 feet? I think it seems like we should have a consistent ordinance that says this is what we're going to do. We're also conflating the fire break with the property maintenance code, which seems like a non sequitur to be in the property maintenance code.
I disagree.
We're talking about a public nuisance type situation. The fire code would have maybe some fire break requirements in it that might be separated. And I don't question their judgment in terms of what would be a fire risk or not. But there's two things that we have to worry about. I don't think an ordinance that says 100 feet, but maybe we'll cut it to something smaller if we decide, whereas the neighbors have no recourse, as far as I understand, to challenge that decision that was made because it's not their property, it's just their neighbor's property. So I would just make a motion that we change the weed code to say that it can be subject to the fire marshal discretion. If he's going to reduce it, it needs to be with the approval of the neighboring properties.
But
or we change it to a specific feet.
That's putting non-science. You're putting the fire marshal that having to defend non-science, right? If by asking the neighbors, well, yeah, I want them to mow it, it'll look better. Okay, well, that's not why the fire marshal's there, so.
Well, then why do we have a rule that says 100 feet?
I don't know. That was our question. That's why we revisited
Maybe
it.
that should be the discussion, rather than
Why
something
do
arbitrary.
we ask for 100 feet? We don't even know where it came from. Which is why when the whole grass issue came up, that was the question that we asked. Why 100 feet? Where did this come from? No one knows where it came from. And quite frankly, I don't even think it's been enforced. But now we know that there is a science behind the fuel breaks based on the wild inland.
The wildland or inland interface go.
Right, but that means that you don't need 100 feet for Firebreak, but maybe you need 100 feet for property maintenance, for public nuisance purposes. I don't know the answer to that question, but just because we don't need it for fire doesn't mean that we don't need to mow it at all, in my opinion.
But how could that 3-foot grass on 10 or 12 acres be considered a nuisance? They have a 25-foot break.
So you're saying they're incorrect about the rodent problem that they're having?
Okay, any rodents need two things. They need, access, food, and water. They're not getting water from that land. They're not getting food from that land. I don't know where they're coming from. For all we know, they're coming from the drainage ditch. They're coming from a house. Anytime people store water or food or barbecue stuff, you're going to attract rodents and vermin and everything else. There's nothing on that land that is attracting them. There's no source of sustenance for them on there. And there are certain times a year where, rodents and other items are perhaps more prevalent. But I don't know, so are roaches. Is everybody not seeing roaches and bugs in their house right now? It's dry. They're looking for sustenance. And so, I don't think this is a property maintenance issue.
Okay, well, I'm explaining my case, so.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Pope.
I leave a little bowl outside for the roaches so they don't have to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're the one with the swimming pool, Ms. Turner, right behind me.
Okay, the way that this agenda item reads is Firebreak/fuel break requirement consideration. So what do you want us to do? Mr. Engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask you a question? And I'm going to base this on, and actually I've done a lot of things for a living. I grew up in Lake Tahoe and worked for the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit, and I worked for the Wasatch, and I was a wildland firefighter for a long time. I came up with stupid things to do in the winter just so I can wait for the summer to come back so I can get back on the fire line. And this is specifically, again, the issues is what do we need to do? What are we supposed to do? Not everything is great. I know from a fact, from my background, 25 foot of a fire break was like a highway. If we got 25 feet, we were just like, the fire break is and I understand when Northcliffe shut down, they had a rodent problem because everything grew up and they really didn't have to do anything because the guy just, the golf course just went. And so I do understand the difference between, say, the property where the college is versus the property where it backs up to residents, okay? But as you show there, even on that spot, even if you did go 100 feet around there, which to me would be super, super generous, you still got that spot in the middle there, where, okay? But we're talking about two different issues here. This specifically is a fire break, fuel break requirements, and what we're talking about is the city ordinance, 100 feet, which I remember, I was part of that discussion where we didn't know where the heck 100 feet came from, versus the 25 feet with fire marshal discretion. Fire marshal discretion, who is the person that is hired to make those type of decisions, who is educated to make those type of decisions, who we rely on to make those type of decisions. And what I want to know from you is can you just give us the difference in your professional?
So
The
you're
difference between
correct.
125 and
No, you're correct. I think what they were trying to do back then is to take something they just didn't understand and say, why is it a blanket 100 feet? There is 100 feet at certain times. If we had an extreme fire load, which that grassy area doesn't meet extreme fire load, we would want 100 feet. But like he said, 30 feet is more than sufficient for just having grass in there. And that, I think, is why we wanted to have, let's go out and evaluate that area. If we're over behind Walmart in a heavy, dense area where there's a lot of brush, we may want more footage. And I think you're talking about, let's not let that fire marshal make the decision whether or not he wants to give 100. They just went with the most extreme is probably where they got that 100 feet. Let's just make the most extreme. But I think the problem comes in where he's showing you, if we take the most extreme and we just blanket that across we're talking about way more of a problem. Now we have to go back to all these people who live in 2 acres or greater, and with the city being a majority of that area, and say, how are we going to police all this and keep this mowed and clear that heavy vegetation? You're not talking about just mowing grass. If I say we need a 100-foot break, that means the trees, everything has to be cleaned out around, and we have to have an area of 100 feet. So I think what we're trying to do is fix that. And you're never going to get both parties involved like you're saying. Of course, if I go to one and say, hey, we feel 30 feet is sufficient because of this light fire load, they're going to say, oh, no, I think they should mow it that whole 100 feet. Well, of course they would. They want 100 feet, but it doesn't make sense to give them 100 feet. We have more than sufficient to move through there in the event. And slow burning grass, that what you're showing where they're standing there is what we consider a light load. There's no trees, there's no trash, there's no vegetation in there other than the grass. And if we can get 25 or 30 feet off of that privacy fence, we can get apparatus in there and protect those exposures before the fire gets there, like you're saying. And that's what we're after. And that's why they decided to let that fire marshal go out and evaluate it on a case-by-case basis and make that decision. And not just blanket 100 feet, because we're going to create way more of a problem and not have a solution on how do we regulate it? Who do we send out to? How do we force them to start trimming trees and cutting grass in all these parcels that are greater than 2 acres?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me finish off by saying that, again, that 25 feet that is as a firefighter, is a highway. And basically what you're doing all around is you're cutting off the vegetation, you're cutting off the fuel for the fire. So as it gets up, even if it gets in that higher brush, you've got that 25 foot, they're going to get up to there. There's no more fuel to burn. It's going to burn out. This whole thing is, we're talking about fire code regulations is in my opinion, is fine and more than adequate for those specifications. I feel sorry for the residents as far as if we're talking about it's something they don't like to look at. And I also agree, and I feel bad about that, but getting down to brass tacks, I also agree with Ms. Turner that this is not a city issue. I applaud, thank you so much, sir, for coming and giving us your side, because I still think there's a get together between you and the person and the community there. There's still something to be done there, and maybe there's some miscommunication, like they always say. There's 2 sides to every story, and the truth lies somewhere in between. But yeah, for us to change fire code regulations, which are totally adequate as far as I'm concerned, doesn't make any sense to me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
I was just going to say, and I'm kind of reiterating, what we're talking about impacts so many properties. And in this specific situation, there was a breakdown in communication for whatever happened, whether or not she walked away feeling like you were trying to require her, you were going to put it back on her. Whereas I can see your point, you were just trying to say, let's find out what that number is and then let's talk. It sounds like there's still more communication that needs to occur between the HOA and the property owners, as opposed to the city getting involved and making a change or discussing something that's going to impact 40 properties versus just this one. That's all.
Anybody else? All right. Next step. What are you asking council to do?
I mean, I
Nothing,
brought it
right?
up, so,
Right.
yeah, I mean,
But
there's
there's
nothing.
no action on it
Yeah,
at the
there's no
moment.
action,
I
so.
think there is room for, see if they can work on.
Yeah, I think getting the two of you together would be a great start, and I think that, I also agree with Councilman Vaughn, though. I do think that it should be looked into further, especially if it's not, I never said it was necessarily just the fire break. I find that timing weird, but I also think there is an issue. Like, people have an issue. I'm not saying it's on him. I'm saying there might, I just think it needs to be looked into more from both parties, and that's it. That's it. That's it.
I agree. So what we'll do is the staff will make a commitment to reach out to Ms. Thomas again, and if Mr. Calvert will as well. And we'll meet with them together and, allow them to use our space to have their discussion.
Yeah.
As we did last time, or we can be on site. But yeah, we'll reach back out.
All right. That way I just don't feel like they're left in the lurch. That's it.
Yeah. Very good. Thanks for covering that, sir. Appreciate it. Let me bring up a suggestion for council. It's 10 minutes to 10 already. We still have some other items I would throw out for potential consideration, even though a lot of these items were suggested by council members, and that's why they were put on the agenda for this evening. The tabs J, M, and N, and possibly tab L. I would like to, maybe you guys want to consider tabling those issues at least for the near future, and we'll get them back on as we can, because we do have some other issues that we need to discuss tonight that we cannot forego. So I would need someone to make that motion that we.
I apologize, Mayor. Could you say?
Yeah,
which
can you say them again?
J,
Through L.
Well, no.
L, M, and N.
J, L, M, N.
Right. And J, M, and N were suggested by council members, and that's really good. The other one is on curfew, which I think we could probably, is there something critical about that we couldn't handle at the next meeting?
Tab J is not even really a discussion. We just wanted to let you know that this is what we came out of your discussion, that it is going to the Planning and Zoning Commission for consideration.
Yeah.
They're required public hearings. We can support
Okay. So we don't even need to do anything at all related to that one at all. All right.
L can wait. Again, M is not city staff. N is procedure back to the council. Other than that, I think the only item that is left then is.
We need tab K and,
No tab 6 and tab 7.
no tab 6 or 7, because that's part of the closed session.
Tab K, if we can move to that, because it actually becomes effective.
No, I understand.
It's our October billing, and so if we don't get the first reading in now and the second reading in, then our billing is off by almost a month.
Okay, no, I totally agree. So what I need, follow my suggestion, we need someone to make a motion that we table L, M, and N.
I make a motion that we table the tabs L, M, and N for discussion at a later
Okay, there's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion? All right, let's call for the vote then to table it. So do we even have to have a vote on a table? We do, okay, okay. Mr. Jurian made this motion and it was seconded by Ms. Bowman? Okay, very good. Call for the vote then.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman?
Aye.
Mayor Person Goolsby?
Aye.
Councilmember Buck?
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Aye.
We're not giving up on it. We're just gonna.
So what I will do for council is, I have a running tab of some of the items that have to be on the next meeting. There's legal notices that were published published public hearings that required. I'll send you out a list of everything that's on there, and then if it's something that's at council's discretion, and you want to even hold it off further, let me know, so we can kind of try to get back into some normally timed meetings. I know they've been really long, budget,
Well, these are,
and everything else. I apologize. I recognize they have been long meetings, and the end is near. Let me just put it that way. I hope
Okay.
I'm not going back to just regular council meetings.
everybody good with that? Okay, sir. Terrific. Let's move on then to tab K, which is to discuss and to consider ordinance 525W 2023. It's an ordinance of the City Council of Universal City revising 525U 2021, Schedule A, base rates as provided in Section 2-3-9, modification of rates, providing for severability and providing for an effective date. This is our first reading, so I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Sidney.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Council. As you know, we do have a contract with Waste Management. Part of that contract allows them to make a CPI fuel adjustment change, provided they provide the City Council with the justification. They have provided that and given us an indication of what that change is going to be. We are bringing it before City Council because as staff, what we really like to do is to revise the ordinance, so that when people go and they look it up online on Unicode, the most up-to-date information is in there. Otherwise, they're looking at the original ordinance and it doesn't have all the correct rates in it. So we're not changing the whole ordinance, we're only changing Schedule A, which is the rate structure. And if this is approved, it goes in for the October bill.
Okay,
Move to approve, Mr. Mayor?
we do have a motion for approval by Councilmember Butt.
Second.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick on the second. Discussion, anyone? I think Tim explained it. Yes, Mr. Butt.
This is something that's kind of beyond our control, is that correct? Waste Management is going to do this. It's in the contract that was negotiated previously. So this is just us keeping up with the items that they're going to do with us. And it's a little bit of general housekeeping in our ordinances. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Very good. Any other discussion, anyone? All right, call for the vote then, please.
Councilmember Buck?
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby?
Grudgingly, yes.
Councilmember Bowman?
No.
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. And we'll move on now to a no tab. We're going to go into a closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code, Section 551.072, regarding the purchase and value of real property. If deliberation in open session would have a detrimental effect on the position of the corporation in negotiations with a third party, and for attorney consultation pursuant to Section 551-071, paragraph parentheses 2, regarding property located at 650 Kitty Hawk Road. So we'll go in a closed session and hopefully be back out very quickly. Thanks for your patience.
Okay. I can't bring anything with me. Just my body.
You can't take stuff. You just.
Join us for happy hour every Thursday from 5 to 8 p.m. at Universal City's Olympia Hills Golf Course and Event Center. Admission is free for all ages to come and enjoy the live music with food and drink specials. For more information, find the Facebook page for the Olympia Hills Golf Course and Event Center.
All right, let's go ahead and reconvene. It is 10:05. Let's go ahead and reconvene the meeting. No action has been taken on the closed session, but it does open us up to tab number 7.
Move to approve. I would like to approve the signing of the letter of intent for real property located at 650 Kitty Hawk Road, and authorize the city manager to sign said documents.
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second by Councilmember Fitzpatrick. Any discussion? Anyone? All right, call for the vote, please. Mary Bell?
Councilmember Najarian?
Aye.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Goolsby?
Aye.
Councilmember Buck?
Aye.
Councilmember Bowman?
Aye.
Okay, the motion
Councilmember
passes.
Vaughn?
Aye. Mr. Vaughn, motion passes unanimously. All right, that concludes our business for this evening. It's time for our city manager comments.
Oh, good Lord. I'll send you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
You can, if you want, you just provide feedback to me, especially if it's an item that you in particular asked to have on the agenda. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we'll press on from there. Okay, very good. Let's start with Mr. Long. Okay. Mr. Long.
Are we having something on 9/11?
9/11 at 9 a.m. at 11 a.m. 9/11 at 9 in the Red Horse Park at the 9/11 Memorial Site.
And are we doing a plaque for Beverly at that ceremony?
Memorial presentation for the plaque for Councilmember.
Okay, great.
We made that decision before that we wanted to have something special for her.
And the only other thing I wanted to acknowledge is I think we all received an email from Ken Mitz asking for his comments to be included in the citizens to be heard. And I don't know that we have that officially set up, that we accept written documents. And I honestly didn't remember the email until I remember while we were here. And so Ken Mitz asked us to include his comments, and we didn't do that officially. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm sorry, Ken, that you're not in town and we did not get those on record.
Yeah.
I'm done.
I think everybody did receive that, I suppose, right? Correct? Right. Yeah, that's something that I know we're contemplating, and I would like to see us consider that we can accept if you will, a citizen's to be heard comment by someone who cannot be physically present. And I or the mayor then would read that particular issue. In his case, he had about 7 or 8 items, and almost all of them were questions, except for a couple of issues. And I really applaud what he's done. It's really good. But I'll make it a point to get a hold of him and discuss it with him.
So he's on vacation for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's why he's not here. He's at work. So, Mayor, if you want, I can either send him an email or reach out to him when he gets back.
Okay, we'll work it out. Okay. Very good. Thanks, Christine. Anything else? Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's see, our next council meeting is going to be the 19th of this month. I will be in Lake Tahoe. Sorry, I have to be there instead of here. But I'll be on my honeymoon. I still plan on zooming in. I'll make a decision later, but so you'll know right off the bat, my backdrop will be making you all jealous. That's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
It is a beautiful place, of course. Ashley?
I mean, no one's here except for the Schneiders, but I still want to thank everyone who showed up and spoke tonight, who took the time to meet with me, and those who emailed me. I feel like the tax rate really is a big deal, and I appreciate those who took their time to give me their thoughts on everything that they wanted and hoped for. Sorry it didn't pan out the way I really hoped for. I always feel like I let you guys down, and I really hate that. So like I said, I just really appreciate those who come and spend the time and take the time and do all the things that they need to do, even though it takes time out of their lives, and it just means a lot. So that's it for me.
Yeah, we're still being live streamed, so people have the opportunity to check out that. So thank you very much. Yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was brought to my attention that the aviation master plan has not been blessed by council or something along those lines. It hasn't been like ratified or finalized, adopted. Thank you. And basically, it's something that we use as a guideline, and sometimes we need to use it as a hammer, and it's hard to use a guideline as a hammer. So if we could have that be up on a future, not the next one, but maybe one of those upcoming that's looking a little light, I'd like to ask my council members if that can be,
Absolutely.
And the mayor, if
yeah.
I'd like to put that on a future agenda to go ahead and adopt that for a vote.
That's fine. That's a consensus, so we'll work on it and get it as a future agenda item then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And we'll research that. I know we had numerous presentations on it over the years, and you may be right.
Yeah, I mean, we spent so much time working on it that if it wasn't set up to, I mean, some of it's set up to be a little bit flexible, but we can be flexible
Okay.
in other ways, so.
Yeah, there was this one thing that happened in all of our lives called COVID.
Yeah.
It happened that everything went into a lockdown, right at the end.
Yes, we'll definitely do it.
That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to apologize to all the residents of Ireland that are out there watching for our city manager's awful imitation of your speech patterns. On behalf of the city council, I apologize to all the residents of Ireland. Mr. Mayor, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Thank you, council. Thank you. Tough decisions. I can honestly say that the best interest of the city, hopefully is being met to the best of our abilities. And I hope that everybody understands that we can't appease everybody. We do our darndest, and that's just why we're here in council representing 20,000 people. My only other thing is I'm going to be attending the Military Affairs Committee luncheon tomorrow in Randolph. It's a good chance for us to meet with the wing commander on usually every couple of month basis and discuss items of interest. And I'll talk to Colonel Taylor about certain issues that have come up and offers that have come up. And so it's a good opportunity for us to interface with our counterparts on base. So that's all I have. Thanks everybody for sticking it out. If you're still out there in the audience, I appreciate it very much. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. And thank you for our stalwarts to stay at the end.
And thus ends our live transmission of the city council meeting. Arrgh.
Hey, that's coming up. Just so y'all know, that's our next council meeting day is Talk Like a Pirate Day. Just giving you a heads up.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve.
Okay.
So when she says Councilmember Bucky, you go, aye.
It's in my calendar, so. And then it's got a reminder right at council time.